Hello, fellow homebrewers. JP here, and I want to introduce to you the brand new Brew Built X1 Conical Series available at More Beer. More Beer sells the highest standard in homebrewing equipment, and the Brew Built Conicals are just that. They're made from mirror-polished 304 stainless steel, and they come with loads of features that you and I have been looking for. They have a full 2-inch bottom dump valve, which will eliminate your clogging issues, while the sturdy base includes 4 reinforced legs, just like those big Pro tanks do. More Beer also carries the Brew Built line of options and add-ons like casters, pressure kits, and even external glycol chillers. So you can find out more about the new Brew Built X1 Conical Unitanks by going over to morebeer.com for detailed videos on the entire line of Brew Built Conicals. You can trust Brew Built with your next fermentation, and you can trust More Beer to find the right conical for you. Brew Built at morebeer.com.
Home brewers, craft brewers, beer lovers, beer drinkers.
Get ready for an all-new experience in information exchange and beer culture.
Your only source for live beer radio that brings expert brewers from around the globe
right to your home.
You're not just listening to broadcasters, it's the Brewcasters
on the Brewing Network.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Brewcast right here on the Brewing Network. Thanks for tuning in and hanging in there, everybody. I know we are just a few minutes late, but it's only a matter of time before the Bay Area traffic got the best of us. There's nothing you can do.
Stupid traffic.
It's a stupid tunnel.
It is a stupid tunnel. And it's stupid that they close down half of the tunnel every day.
There's 3 tunnels, and you have to share one of the tunnels depending on which direction you're going. But then when they do maintenance, they don't even share the tunnel. Then it's only one tunnel, and everyone squeezes into the tunnel. Oh. On top of them not knowing how to merge because they're Californian, and Californians can't merge.
Exactly.
If you're from California, you can't merge. I'm not afraid to say it right here.
You're right.
On the radio. You non-merging idiots. All right? And anyway, like I said, it was only a matter of time before it got the best of us, Doc.
Yeah, there you go. Well, that whole fourth bore thing that they keep talking about.
Yeah.
All the millions of dollars they need, and they keep trying to vote for it. But
for this.
Yeah.
Oh, well, serious. I want them to tear down this mountain.
Well, they closed one of the bores in the other direction for the commute. Excuse me, the commute.
Yeah.
There's no commute direction now.
No, there's not.
Or no non-commute. Yeah. It's screwed both ways.
You know it's bad if Daniela, the environmentalist, wants to tear down the mountain.
Tear down the mountain.
Yeah.
There's a solution for you.
Move the stupid mountain.
No, it's a trade-off because all this exhaust that exists because of this tunnel and because of people not merging and because of people being stupid and all the stress it causes, and it's going to make me die 5 years earlier at least.
Settle down. Have a beer.
We're actually doing quite well and happy to be here. Just was a kind of a mad dash to get in here, but no worries. We're not on a strict schedule necessarily. All you had to do was hang out for 10 minutes and listen to good Brewing Network music, which is always kind of fun too. Yeah, got you another beer. Now, the beer I've got today, Doc, did you pour one out of the keg?
Yes, I did.
It's John Plissé's Helles, the latest batch of his 50-gallon Helles.
PDG coming through.
Yeah, and it's a great beer. He gave us a keg, and I even called him yesterday, a couple days after he gave it to us, because I was opening up a new pint of it and taking a sip, and I had to call him just to tell him it's really nice, and thanks for giving it to us. It's another great Helles out of John. And I believe this will be the one that he does competitions for next year.
Yeah, probably.
He likes to make it sort of the year before and get it properly aged and then enter him in competitions. I told him it's a little thinner than his last one, a little less body.
That's what I was thinking. It's pretty dry. It's nice drinking beer though.
Yeah,
it goes down real smooth.
It's good summertime beer.
Yeah, absolutely. It's tasty. I have a feeling we'll finish it tonight.
Easily.
Yeah. Depends on how much of a head start you got on it already.
Well, we didn't dip in it. I'm guessing there's.
Too much, yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and say there's a little over 3 gallons left in there.
Okay,
So
that's gone.
yeah, it's done, right? Today's show, and I hope you guys are all as excited about this as I am, because we've been waiting for this. Now, we've done a yeast show with Chris White before, and we've done it over the phone. But today, we actually have the brothers White in the studio. We've got both of the twins, Chris and Mike White. And I'm pretty sure it's Mike that's with us now. But but who knows, right? Mike, how are you today?
I'm Chris.
Shit! I knew I was going to get it wrong. Damn it. Now, I can tell because Mike's the cool one and Chris is the nerdy one.
Exactly.
Absolutely. You'll see that tonight.
We'll all be able to tell the difference by the end of the show. You'll know, you'll never doubt again which White you're talking to. And Chris is actually still on his way. I think he got stuck in the same traffic that we did. So Mike's with us right now, and that's fine because we dick around for a good half hour anyway, don't
Right.
we? You know?
Of course, it's fun.
Yeah, we got plenty of stuff to do before we get into the good stuff. So if you've got any questions about yeast, obviously in particular White Labs yeast, then you're going to want to get those ready now and join us in the chat room. You can send them through to Danielle and she'll get the questions to me. Or of course you can call 888-401-BEER. You could also Skype us at the Brewing Network. All sorts of ways to contact us and make sure your questions come through. I already got some email questions for you guys too, Mike, so these people are prepared for your show. It's going to be a good time, and we're going to talk everything yeast. I hope you came prepared.
We came prepared.
Good. And I hope you get drunk as well.
We'll see.
I'm actually curious to see which of the White brothers is going to handle the alcohol better.
Yeah,
I wonder if that's a difference for twins. I mean, Mike has had like a couple of beers already. I don't know if Chris is drinking while he's driving.
Let's hope not.
Let's hope not. So we'll see.
Which one of you is just a bigger drinker in general? Like it likes to drink a little more than the other. Either one?
It's about the same.
Is it?
Yes, and that answer applies to a lot of categories.
Okay.
It's about the same.
Yeah. You guys are the sort of atypical twins.
My guess is I'm a little better at it.
Okay.
But we should do a test later on.
Yeah, I think
You're better
determine.
at being a twin?
I think I'm better at handling my liquor.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That will be a good test to see later on. Doc, you didn't happen to bring a breathalyzer with you, did you?
No, didn't.
Yeah, that's okay. We'll do the old just appearance test, you know. Whichever one of you is either sleeping in the chair or having fallen out of it.
Of course, we'll have to have Chris catch up.
Yeah, that's true. He is going to have to chug at least 2 or something when he gets here just to play catch up.
I'd like to see that.
It's always good fun. But we are going to get to the good information. So like I said, if you got yeast questions, get them ready. We're going to be happy to answer them for you. The newsletter's out, Daniela.
I know, I've seen it.
The new Brewing Network newsletter. If you didn't get it, it's because you didn't sign up by clicking the newsletter button right on our homepage.
That's why I didn't get it.
That's why Doc didn't get it. He didn't sign
I
up.
heard about it. I heard how cool it was.
Yeah, I actually have to compliment Justin. It's really good.
Came out nice. Thank you
It
very
came
much.
out very nice.
I was happy with it, and that's why it's been 6 months since we've put one out, because the other one had lots of issues. People said they couldn't read it, they didn't like the colors, there weren't enough pictures. I don't know what they said. All sorts of things were wrong with this. So I kind of put it on hold for a while. We went to work on some other things and got it all wrapped up and decided it was time to reinvent the newsletter, and it's now called the Brewcaster, and you can get it once a month. We'll be putting out another one right at the beginning of September, and then subsequently every month. And we're just going to keep you up to date on what's happening. So,
beautiful.
If you're a podcast listener and you don't really use our website and you just kind of get the podcast and go about your business, you're going to want to go ahead and sign up for the newsletter because it'll just come to your email and you don't have to use our site, and we'll let you know what's happening. So click the newsletter button right on our homepage and you can sign up for that.
I love the comic on that newsletter.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's right. The Where Drunk Meets Genius, a great comic. I put a clip, just a little caption of it, and you can go to www.wdmg.com. It's Where Drunk Meets Genius.com, and you can check out the Brewcasters in their comic strip debut. Doc, did you see that? Because you're in it.
No, I didn't see it.
Yeah, you were put into cartoon form. on a comic strip. It's a great comic strip. It's really funny. You've been off the forum. I know you've been real busy, and that's where it got posted first. So I'll show it to you after the show.
Okay, I'd like to see that.
You're going to actually be totally stoked. I'm surprised.
I'm a cartoon.
Yeah, I'm surprised you haven't seen it. You'll be really. Your kids are going to go nuts. They're going to love it. It's actually it's totally kid friendly. It's fine.
It is,
and it kind of looks like you, Doc. The cartoon looks like the other cartoon looks like me. He did a great job with all of us. So
He gave me really big boobs.
he gave you
Like you don't already have them.
No, I mean like really, really.
Like I said.
All right, let's do a little feedback real quickly. Let's see. I've listened to the first couple of shows when you guys started, but I've not been able to catch your broadcast after the first few. I've come back, and I'm very happy and excited to see that you now have downloadable shows. He has been away for a while, and we got our downloads up fairly quickly. Holy crap, do I have some catching up to do, he says. I love that you guys did this, and the show is freaking awesome. Keep up the good work. One thing I would like to see in the future would be a troubleshooting show. I've browsed through all the archives and did not see any shows dedicated to troubleshooting and fixing flaws. I think it would be a good choice for the future. But like I said, I think I still have 15 or so shows to catch up. Keep up the good work, and that's from Jason in Wisconsin. Doc, I think that's a good idea.
I do too.
A good troubleshooting flaws show, and what we'll have to do is compile a list of the common flaws. Chris Graham, I'm sure, can help us out with
We
that.
could just take one of your brew days.
Yeah,
tear it apart.
and then go through every single flaw that's there and tell people how to fix that.
Yes.
We can do that. Chris, you want to help us out with that?
Absolutely. That sounds like a fun one.
That's probably kind of the stuff that you guys get around the shop all the time anyway, just people coming in with different flaws and they want you to tell them what it is.
Exactly.
Or I bet he's on the phone all the time with people.
It's just hunting. You're always hunting, isolating what that one little thing is that screwed up.
Yeah. You guys spend a lot, but you in particular, you spend a lot of time at the phone at B3 helping people troubleshoot things?
All right, Doc. Let's let Doc answer this. How many hours do you think I spend a week on the phone?
Or just in a day. I spend 90% of his time when he's at work, he's on the phone.
Yeah.
Handling somebody's problem.
Gotcha. And I don't mean just like problems with products that have to be rectified. Just advice type of things?
Troubleshooting.
Yeah.
Like today I was working and probably spent 6 hours just going through, finding where people are, they're not hitting their gravities they want. They're not hitting, they're getting bacteria problems, but they're not major. They're just minor. Most people aren't willing to admit it's a problem.
Yeah.
But they need to.
Right, right. We got our first caller already. It's this guy, Doc Pagala. He called into the lunch meet show,
I heard
too.
that.
Hi, how you guys doing there?
Hey, Doc. What's up? Doc's like a Starship Trooper or something. I forget. He works for some Starfleet.
I drive transit bus, but I kind of name who they are because we're kind of in contract disputes. So for now, I work for Starfleet. Okay.
Okay, no worries. What can we do for you, Doc?
Yeah, I had a question about your longevity of your yeast.
Oh, you're already jumping right into that, are you?
I am.
Okay.
Because I've got in the fermenter right now a batch of Jamel's chocolate hazelnut porter that I saved over from when I did JP's Imperial Stout.
Yeah.
And I was wondering how long or how many times can I expect to repitch with that?
All right. Which yeast was it?
It's your English ale.
How many times can you repitch your English? Chris White has made it into the studio, by the way. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you.
It's good to see you. We've already established that you're the ugly twin and the not cool twin, and that was all just because you're late.
They can't hold his liquor.
Yes, when I get here late, I guess.
Yeah,
you've been bashed already.
Yeah.
Well, I have had time for a sip of beer. I have had 2 sips of beer, actually.
Okay.
So.
Well, that's good. So you're already primed.
Oh, yeah.
Real quick, and we'll go on with our feedback. How many times can you repitch your English?
The answer you hear a lot about fermentation is it depends.
Okay.
So it depends how clean the fermentation was, how good the fermentation was, how healthy the yeast was, the gravity of the beer. So there's really no right answer, but home brewing 2 or 3 times usually.
Okay. All right, there you go. Thank you for the call, Doc. Keep calling in a little bit later. We're like at 5:30ish. We're going to go ahead and start the yeasty talk. Until then, we're screwing around because Chris has got to catch up with us. And
drink your beer, man.
What are you drinking,
drink, motherfucker?
What, did you get it out of the keg, Chris?
The keg.
You get okay.
Yes.
You're drinking
Really?
John Plesset's Helles.
Oh.
Yeah.
You like it?
Hellas.
You know John.
It's a Helles. Oh.
Yes.
You like it?
It's good. Yes.
All right, we'll talk about that later. That doesn't sound too nice. Justin, Doc, Daniela, never before have I been happy to hear commercials on a radio show. But hearing more and more ads on the show means that you guys are doing well. I'm catching up from vacation, and I'm finally on the 724 show. But all the shows are great. And that's a very nice thing to say. I actually say that to Doc and Daniela often, and to some of the guests that come in here, because a lot of the breweries that come in and do our show, and the Whites and these guys, they come in and they go, how do you do it? Like, how do you afford this? And the deal is basically that some breweries and some people have been very generous to sponsor us. Obviously, Beer, and More Beer is our biggest and most reliable and consistent and helpful sponsor. And everybody knows that we get emails about that all the time, that they just say, man, do I love B3 for supporting you guys. And that's cool. So I often say to people that come in here, it's really the only sort of broadcasting that I've ever experienced where our listeners ask us to put commercials on.
Yeah.
Which is amazing, because I don't like who likes commercials? But here they're very content specific, and they have to do with the topic, and people, they like to hear them, and it means that they know we're going to stick around a lot longer. So that was a nice bit of feedback.
Who was that?
No name. He sent anonymous.
You'd be surprised how many orders we get with we give an area that people can write a comment in when they're ordering, or we have a help desk that they can write in.
Yeah.
And the amount of people, like when you guys first came on, right. Once in a blue moon we get an email like, hey, TBN, great stuff.
Right.
Keep supporting them.
Cool.
Now it's at least 3 times a week.
Wow.
Then I get personal ones like, hey, keep it up. Don't back down on those guys.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's great. I love those guys.
So whoever you're paying to do that.
I was going to say. Yeah.
Successful.
Checks in the mail, folks. Keep buying the shirts. I'll keep paying you for the comments.
They keep saying John P. at More Beer. I don't know.
Yeah. You know what's funny? Well, I've gotten a couple, and I think that they CC'd you guys. Some people write to B3, and these I think it's funny and very, it really shows the dedication. They're very specific. I saw one that said it was like a master charge commercial, and it basically said money spent on B3 before the Brewing Network, $15. Money spent after the Brewing Network, $750. Like it was they really wanted you to know how much I thought that was pretty funny.
Well, whoever it is out there, I'm going to say thank you. I won't say your name out loud, but we got a guy right after the Frugal show who purchased well over $1,000 worth of stuff.
Holy.
Saying, thank you for the Frugal show. It's my favorite show so far.
Wow.
It was great. I learned a ton, and he spent over $1,000 on his next invoice.
All right.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Way to go, BNers. And that's what we need. It's not just putting the commercials on the air. A sponsor needs to see response to it. So, wow, hey, that's some response right there. I like it. Beautiful. All right, here's another one, and it's a question that Doc and Chris Graham can help us out with from a listener. I was listening to your recent show, which was last week's, and we started to talk about first wort hopping, and wanted to ask you a question regarding the calculations and figuring out the amounts to throw in a first wort. I heard someone say that you should put 30% of your total hop charge into the first wort hop. Is this in addition to the recipe's schedule of hops, or do you subtract some of the boiling hops?
Well, you could look at it 2 different ways. You can use this as an additional hop.
Okay.
And take it out before the boil.
Yeah.
Or you can keep it in there for the boil, in which case you don't minus it from there because you're still going to isomerize the bittering units from it. So
okay. So if you were going to leave it in the boil, then you would subtract it from your hop.
But when calculating how much you're going to use of it, use 30% of what you were going to put in for the bittering.
Okay.
Of your total.
And then you leave it in there.
Okay.
Yeah, because even if it doesn't isomerize at mash temperatures, it'll be carried over into the boil
Exactly.
kettle, and then they'll be isomerized in
But
there.
you can never have too much hops. I mean.
Agreed. Doc doesn't agree, but I do. Chris.
Yeah, we won't listen to him.
All right, his second part of the question then is, does it matter if you're doing a 60 or a 90-minute boil? He says, I've only heard people talk about first wort hopping prior to 60-minute boils, but not 90. Does it matter?
Well, you're going to get more hop utilization in a 90-minute, too, so you're going to need to knock down your total bittering hop units.
Yeah, I think there's also definitions that need to be established because the 60 versus 90-minute boil a lot of times is perspective.
Yeah.
A lot of people, as soon as it's in the boil kettle, they're calling it a boil, which I don't agree with. I wait till, it usually takes me 15 minutes or so to get up to the boil. Then you have the whole hop break part where you're fighting the foam.
Yeah.
To the point where that gets settled down. And so some people when they call a 90-minute boil, that's including all that stuff.
Okay.
For me, as soon as that hop break settles down, that's where I start my 60-minute boil.
Okay.
Doc, I believe that's where you start your 90.
Yeah, that's about where I start right
And
now.
so-
I get everything settled, get it rolling, boiling. I start to see the clumps hitting together at the hop break.
Yeah.
And that's when I put my first charge of hops in.
Yeah, I guess it depends
After
on what
that.
kind of beer you're making. If you're doing first wort hopping, you're probably not doing most of the beers that would benefit from 90-minute boils.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's kind of like I would probably be doing that with 60-minute boil style beers.
Okay. Now I think that's interesting because I don't ever I wait for it to really be boiling. I don't start it as soon as I turn on the heat, obviously, but I don't wait till after the hop break. So I think that's interesting, Doc.
Yeah.
That you'll let it go ahead and settle down, stabilize.
And that's when I throw in my hops.
That same here. You
bittering.
should really let it settle down because adding the hops actually creates a foaming reaction usually too. So if
Yeah.
you're fighting the foam and adding the hops in there,
Yeah.
you're just double negative right there.
Right. I just thought that you would have to calculate for the extra time because you're boiling, but I guess if there's no hops in there, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't, you could boil for an hour. I mean, some people do 90-minute boils where they don't add the hops till 60.
Right.
They'll boil 30 minutes, then add.
Yep.
Okay.
So there's other ways around that one too. Plus, there's some research out there that says getting rid of some of the hot break, getting it to clump together, actually help your utilization some,
Right.
and not tie up a lot of the alpha acids in with the protein.
Okay. Someone in the chat room wants to know if you skim the hop break off the top because you get all those chunks at the
I
top
do.
there.
This is Doc versus me right here.
I'm a skimmer.
Okay.
Chris every time he's brewing with it, what are you doing that for?
Yeah.
I don't like to look at it.
I've heard of a few skimmers. You don't skim, huh, Chris?
No, I mean, you can. There's nothing wrong with skimming. I just don't find a need for it.
Gives me something to do for about
Yeah, I think
15
that's
minutes.
more.
Yeah, that's what I think too. You can take the spoon and what else are you doing, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You got a beer in one hand and you're skimming with the other.
That's more the point of it is to have something to do. For me, I don't like to tinker that much.
Yeah, okay. Just leave it alone for a
Yep.
while.
I don't care about it.
Skimming. You don't skim either, Chris?
No skimming.
We should point out that Chris is a homebrewer. Mike, you homebrew also?
Occasionally.
Occasionally.
Are you a
homebrew.
skimmer?
Would you skim off that junk on the top?
Absolutely not.
No.
I love it all.
You just leave it all in there. You're not taking out proteins or anything when you're skimming,
It's
are
all
you?
right. No, you're fine. You're taking out the
It
hot
wouldn't.
break.
It wouldn't be enough to really make
No.
an impact.
And it's stuff if it's going to settle out as hot break anyway,
Yeah.
that's what you want. You're not going to want it to go into the fermenter anyway.
So do you admit, Doc, though, that it's really sort of pointless?
I don't like looking at it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's because you got ADD and stuff, though. You're like really freaked out about all. And I'm the same way, though. Like if it looks freaky to me, I don't want it there. So
Like, it's an obsessive compulsive.
Yeah.
A simple trick for all you guys worrying about boil over, especially if you're in smaller pots. Ice water in a spray bottle is the easiest thing
Yeah.
to help control it, and just spray around the lip of the kettle.
Right.
Cool that down enough so that as the hop or the hot proteins come straight up, they'll kind of go more towards the center and fall back in instead of coming out all over the place.
And that's a great idea because we've talked about it before that if you're doing the blow on it method to get your foam down, you might pass out and fall in. Yeah,
Well, let's not do that.
so I like the spray bottle and the ice cube idea.
You can stir it too if you don't have that right away. Break the surface tension until it starts really boiling.
And by the way, when you're boiling your yeast starter, especially if you're doing it in an Erlenmeyer flask, again, having a couple ice cubes handy if it's going to start boiling over as you're cooking it there.
Yeah, spray bottle will work just fine.
Do it there. Okay.
I use foam control and it doesn't happen.
I would just suggest to not ask Mike White to help you watch the boil.
Yeah.
You'll turn around and he'll be in the other room.
Like watching football or something? What happens?
Get another beer.
You just get sidetracked?
I need to get another beer. I need to talk to people. This hobby requires a lot of patience.
Yeah.
And,
You're a busy guy.
Well, he's exaggerating. And keep that in mind at some of his other answers.
Okay.
No, just joking.
Yeah, everything is an exaggeration coming out of Chris. I've noticed that. I actually exaggerate about Chris myself. Like Daniela and I do this because I have this opinion of Chris. I love it when Chris is hanging out with us, and I'm going to do it all through the show too. Because for some reason, I just think that Chris knows everything
So do I.
that there is to know about everything. So as Daniela and I are arguing about things during the week or whatever it may be, especially if it's anything scientific, could have nothing to do with yeast, I go, yeah, well, you wait till Chris is back
Yeah.
because we're going to ask Chris.
And I do the same. Exactly. We're going to ask him. He's going to tell you.
Like we were having this argument. We'll have it afterward with you, but we were having an argument about when you can get suntan and sunburn, and I say that after 4 o'clock in the day, the sun is at such an angle that the UV rays are no longer strong enough because they're refracted through the Earth's atmosphere. You like all this, Doc? They're refracted through the Earth's atmosphere to such a point that you can't get a tan or a sunburn. And
I say that's incorrect because not in our region where we are located. It doesn't matter where the sun is. You can still get sunburned.
After 4 o'clock, sunburn or not?
I don't think so.
Aha! I told you he knows everything.
All right.
He grows yeast for a living.
Yes. So if there's anything you want to know during today's show, just feel free to call and ask.
I have this itch.
Yeah, got that.
Mayonnaise.
Leave that one. Well, he knows that too. A little mayo will help. All right, the last bit of feedback, because this one's important. I really like this one, Doc, and so will you. It says, hey, I want to thank you and Jameel and Doc and John and Daniela for putting together such a great show. After taking almost 4 years off from home brewing, listening to the BN has got me brewing again, and I just entered my first home brewing competition.
Yeah, I like that.
He said, I was really curious to get feedback from the judges on my beers and decided to take Jameel's advice and go ahead and give it a go. To my surprise, I ended up winning first place in my category using English Pale Ale with Jameel's Ordinary Bitter recipe. I don't belong to any local clubs, and I feel like the BN is my club. So I entered my brew using the Brewing Network as my club affiliation. I still can't believe I placed, and have to thank you for all the great information you and your guests have provided. Can't wait to hear the next show, and that's from Chris from Groton, Massachusetts.
All you people who don't know who to enter as, if you're not in, just write Doze. It's easier.
Yeah.
Write the BN. The Doze is also the local club around here. I actually officially submitted our name to the Brewers Association, to the AHA though, for the Brewing Network to be a club.
Very good.
And I just put a comment because I don't want to take away from local homebrew clubs. I think you should join your local homebrew club and have the face-to-face interaction and the people to brew together with. So what I put as our comments was, if you don't have a local club and not enough people to start one, join ours, because we're a global club, and essentially we have meetings every week. We have them right here at 5 o'clock on the Brewing Network.
12-step.
That's right. So that's the deal with that. Go ahead and join the Brewing Network Club. And hey, glad that we helped. And you should take Jameel's advice and enter competitions just to get feedback on your beer, because it really is a great experience. Daniela got a medal. She was wearing it around proudly this week.
You made me wear it.
Yeah, of course. Now, I got a certificate, and we've talked about this, and so at first I was sort of pacified by the certificate, and then I realized, because I've got your envelope here too, Doc.
I was wondering what happened to that.
You guys both got certificates too. You got your medals and a certificate. And it doesn't say like a certificate because you got it doesn't say 4th place or anything. It says, in recognition of your 27 points, here's a certificate. Yeah, so it doesn't mean everybody got certificates.
Well, they get different certificates for different levels of points.
There you go.
So if you make over 30, you're going to get one kind. Over 35, you get a different kind of certificate.
What competition?
What's the cutoff? What's the bottom point?
I think it's 26.
What was the competition?
It's 26.9.
That was the California
Southern California Homebrew Championship.
Okay.
I won silver. You didn't hear that?
No,
39 points.
Yeah. That's pretty good. 39 is a great score. Yeah. I mean, a lot of competitions really make me laugh, especially ones geared more towards commercial breweries, i.e. California State Fair.
Uh-huh.
Every brewery you walk into has a medal from that, because every person who enters gets a medal.
See, I don't like that.
As far as I understand it. Because it's all by county and by style. So every style in every county gets first, second, and third place.
Right.
So you could have 10 people saying, yeah, I got a golden IPA at the California State Fair, because they're all entering as different counties.
Yeah. See, I think that there has to be winners and there has to be losers.
Well, that's why Great American Beer Festival is a better judge of breweries than something like California State Fair.
You'd think that someone like me wouldn't advocate that there should be losers. You think I should advocate
Absolutely.
It's just a given.
But I do. I think that there should never be a tie, and that there should always be winners and losers.
You're always going to be sad in your life.
And not everybody should get a certificate either.
Now you're just bitter.
You are.
Yeah. Okay, it's time to move on to our new segment. We're going to do this every week. Doc, you missed out on this last week. It's a great new segment. It's called Daniela's World Vigorously.
Oh, cool.
And it's all about things that happen outside of the United States. A lot of times I get accused of being too regional, and I just don't know enough about I'm not worldly enough. But Daniela is, and so she's going to scour the globe for things about beer and beer culture and different rituals that happen all over the place, all across the globe.
Anything related to beer.
And that's how we invented Daniela's World Vigorously. Daniela, what do you have for us this week?
Today, I thought we should do some education. Since the Belgian invasion here in our house, sort of, like we drink Belgians now all the time. Dr. Scott has brought many over, and we really appreciate that beer. I thought we could do some education, and so I flew in a couple of friends from Paris who are going to help us to pronounce Belgian names correctly, and who are going to help us to explain what those words mean.
I love it. All right.
Cool.
So should we take this call first?
Of course you should.
So we won't be in the dark about those labels anymore.
That's right. Well, and what happens is that we, I think, tend to mispronounce things, not because we're dumb necessarily.
Everybody does.
but like even when we talk to craft brewers about certain beers from Belgium and different things, I think that it just becomes common that we stick to a name because that's what we've heard over and over. Well, now we're going to get the authentic pronunciation.
Right. And I mispronounce things all the way. I mean, Vigorously is a good example, and I don't want to do that anymore.
No, except for that, you have to stick with that.
I'll stick with Vigorously now.
Caller, you're on the Brewing Network. What can we do for you?
Hey, what's up, guys?
Not much. Who are we talking to?
Crotch.
Hey, Crotch, how are you?
I'm good.
What, are you hiding under somebody's bed or something? You're a little quiet over there.
Yeah, I'm still playing around with my my Skype a little bit. It's been messing up lately.
All right, what do we got?
And I got the dogs wrestling in the front yard being nice and distracting.
Nice.
You hear them?
I can't. That's a good thing. Oh, I kind of can hear them, yeah.
So the Rottweilers wrestling with the children next door?
Yeah.
They're playing.
Swinging from the tail of the horse.
What can we do for you?
I wanted to know what's the best way to reculture yeast out of the fermenters. If I just have like a standard bucket or a carboy, what's the best way to get that yeast back out, and what's the best thing to store them in?
Boy, people are pushing us right along
I know.
today, aren't they? Is it because we started 10 minutes late that we have to get right to the yeast discussion? Is that what's happening?
No,
it's just a good question.
Just a question I have, because I like to. I'm frugal.
It's a good question. Is it a long answer? Do you want to wait to do the answer, or can you?
It's a long answer.
Yeah, so let's hang on a sec. Let's get through Daniela's World Vigorously. Crotch, do me a favor and put it in the chat room to Daniela, just so that we make sure we get to it, and we'll do that first thing when we start the yeast discussion.
PM me, Crotch.
Sounds good.
All right, thanks, brother.
Later.
Cheers. We'll fight with the animals over there.
All right. So in my Vigorous Belgian world, I have found this website, which was actually pretty nice. It's called www.belgianstyle.com. And I've browsed a little bit through this, and I found a lot of information about Belgium. So we start with the lambic ales. So my friends from Paris here, Delphine and Yen, are here, and they're going to help me to pronounce this. You all know the style goose, right?
Goose. How do you pronounce that?
How do you pronounce it properly?
Goose. Goose.
Goose.
Very close. All right.
It's very close. It's a blend of aged and young lambic ale. Is that correct, Jan?
Yep.
Yeah.
Is that proper? Okay, then what we drink here all the time is the raspberry flavored lambic ale, and we tend to call it framboise.
Yeah, Doc, what do you say?
I say framboise.
Yeah. And Chris Graham, where's he at? Is he hiding over? What do you say, Chris? He's got a mouthful of food. I love it. Chris White, what do you say?
Framboise.
Yeah, I think that's the common thing that craft brewers and all of us call it framboise.
We don't call it framboise.
We don't call it framboise, which, what is the proper, and what is framboise? What does it mean? It's a French word, yeah?
Yes.
And what is the French word for?
Raspberry.
Okay. And what's the proper pronunciation?
Framboise. Framboise.
So you actually do pronounce the end of the word?
Yeah, we do.
See, I think it's really interesting that we just sort of assumed that the S and the E are silent at the end there. Right?
So do I. Why would we assume that?
What's the rule, Jan? And whether you pronounce the end or you don't?
Usually, if there's an E, you pronounce it.
Okay.
And an S with two vowels on each side of the S is Z, and if there's two S, then it's S.
Okay. But in this case, it's a Z. It's a framboise.
Framboise. Yeah.
I find it interesting to know that it's raspberry because it helps you understand why this beer is called framboise, actually, because it is a raspberry-flavored lambic, and I think that's very good to know. Because I always get confused with those labels. Why is this beer that? Why is an IPA an IPA? I've learned why.
Yeah.
So that's good.
And now you know.
Now I
Framboise.
know. Of course, there's a lot of other Belgian styles. We all know how to pronounce Chimay. I do that right? It's a Chimay. That's the Trappist Abbey Ale. We all know Westmalle. That's correct too, right?
Maybe it's Flemish.
Oh, that's Flemish. That's a different thing too, because in Belgium they speak French and Flemish. And Flemish is some weird mix out of French, German, Dutch, and everything I can imagine.
So do the Flemish do a V for their W's or a W for the W's? Because Daniela would say Westmalle.
I guess it's more like something like German.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's correct.
All right.
Another very good thing that you like in order to recover from your hangovers is the golden. It's here it's categorized as a golden ale, and that's the Duvel. That's how I pronounce it. We've heard it differently though too from really good Belgian beer brewers even.
Yeah, we often hear a Duvel.
Duvel
is one way that people say it, or Duvel. What's the proper way to say? Is that a French word as well?
I think so. Duvel is kind of the second way you say it.
Duvel.
Duvel.
Okay.
So that's Duvel.
So it's definitely not Duvel.
No.
And the interpretation it gives here is it's the classic golden special.
Okay.
That's what a Duvel is. Beautiful beer as well, I would say.
Great beer. Good for hangovers.
I think the Hoegaarden is a wit beer too, right? That the wit beer is not a French word. The Hoegaarden is it. So that's how, though, I think how you would pronounce it. What about the lambic, cherry-flavored lambic ale, I would say Kriek?
Kriek.
Kriek?
Yeah.
Do you guys know that word, Dr.
Sure.
Scott? How would you say it as an American?
We say creek as an American, or crick if you're from the Midwest.
Going down to the creek.
Going down to the creek.
So I guess the only difference there is that we say it creek as if it were spelled like a little body of water flowing down a hill. We would say creek, but there's a roll in there's like a
what's the R,
right? Well, but there's also the thing happening.
There's a thing happening.
How do you say it properly?
Kriek.
Creek.
It's okay.
It's more the R than the then,
Kriek.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so you do both in there.
Right. Dr. Scott, do you have any idea where the word lambic comes from? Why is it a lambic?
Don't know.
You don't know. Jan gave me one possible interpretation. I wasn't able to confirm that on the internet, but we were talking about the storage thing, right?
But apparently it's not that. It's alambic. It's totally something else.
Oh, okay. So doesn't apply.
No.
All right. So we know it's Duvel. It's framboise.
Framboise with a Z, not an S.
Is it?
Yeah.
Framboise.
Yeah.
There you go. All right. That was learning French Belgian with Daniela.
It's the first thing I've ever learned on this show.
You listened?
Is how to pronounce framboise properly.
We'll see if you can remember it later.
Yeah.
I doubt it.
So what do you think, Doc? It's very common for all of us to say framboise, and that's what people expect us to say. Will you change what you call it now?
Of course.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah.
I think we should.
I'll be correcting other people,
Yeah,
too.
I think we really should and say it the right way. Even though they're going to expect us to say framboise, we should say, no, it's framboise.
I mean, don't you cringe when somebody calls it a Hefeweizen?
Yeah.
A Hefeweizen.
Yeah.
R in Hefeweizen.
Yeah. There's also, actually, I think there could be like a small coffee table book on ways to fuck up Hefeweizen. Because there's tons of ways that people say it, right?
Well, Hefeweizen is my favorite.
Yeah, that's a good
Where's
one.
the cow?
Give me one of them Hefeweizens to take down to the crick. Yeah, there's terrible ways to pronounce Hefeweizen. Daniela, what's the authentic way for?
Hefeweizen.
Hefeweizen.
No, it's easy.
Or Weizbier is actually what it is.
Weizenbier.
Weizenbier. Oh, it's not Weizbier.
No.
Okay.
That's not a word.
Not a word. We made that up?
You did.
We tend to do that.
We do.
Especially me. In the we sense. All right, we're going to take a quick break. Of course, we're here with the White brothers from White Labs Yeast Company, and real happy to have them. We're going to talk all things yeast the entire show. I know you guys are anxious to get to it, so when we come back, we'll get right down to business and start talking yeast with Chris White and Mike White right here on the Brewing Network.
You're listening to the Brewcasters on the Brewing Network.
We are the most popular beer program out there. in the internet world by far, and I think we'll keep it the way we do it. If you want the fancy stuff, well, email me and tell me. We'll put it in if you want. I've got all this fancy software I can play around and have all the funny introductions.
For 10 minutes of the program only at this stage.
Yeah. But if I'm doing a 3-hour program, a 5-hour program, I've got to fill it out. How do you fill it out? Big long introductions, big long
music,
funny things.
Let's play a song from such and such.
Yeah, and have all this sort of crappy stuff in the thing. But no.
Sunday night, 5 o'clock rolls around. What's that sound? The voice of the brewing underground. I rush home. What's with the Abacast stream? Goddamn, it's almost time. Why don't you work? Fucking thing, it's 5:02. I reboot. Asshat iTunes. I hope Justin made the free FM commute. I'm on. Thank God, not a moment too soon. Holy shit, I just got booted out of the chat room. I won't back, motherfucker, when you do your risking. O2, I'll hail the boat. Jay-Z, do like I told you. Do what he say. Well, okay, at least mostly. And hit that fucking whirlpool Viagra roast. Sometimes I don't, and I won't bitch more than a little bitch. Bye, I love that sweet shit that likes like that arrow bit. Damn, my Yeast will not prove and fucking booth being rude. Boom, there goes the blow off tune and fuck this whole chat room. I want out, Justin Chef, there goes my chocolate stout. And I never want to hear the word run high skip about. I give up, 50G, why don't you push eject me? I'm screaming Gucci when G pushes me off the screen. Jamil, JP, Johnny G, I can't think, but then I hear Doc's little voice in my ear screaming, drink, motherfucker, drink, motherfucker, drink. The BN, got me going for a silver or gold. The BN, but do I bitch warm or cold? The BN, crew, get unrefined. The Brewing Network, I've saved 5 gallons at a time. The BN, got me going for a silver or gold. The BN, don't know the bitch warm or cold. The BN, crew, get unrefined. The Brewing Network, I've saved 5 gallons at a time. I need some TBN Bach. What a shock, there's always holding the stock. Tick-tock, the visa's unlocked, Sean. Knock, knock, doc. Can you walk the walk? Pull out an airlock. A cock in his world flock. There's no mod box. Into the mask goes a butt crack like a true breeder. It's that for pale ale, my man, Boogita. Flooper, you beard herd. That's Travis you just heard. The only man I know whose name is a cuss word. Come hang with Jays. I'm a Justin Haggerty. And no one understands a word Daniela says. Either biscuit the pit bull or code right in full. We'll sniff your crack if you got the Jane hat. Dude, line Excel, where's my hat? Go tip pound Matt Bet. Trans to the low fat. And lunch me some grass ass. And what about Crouch Rock? He's more than just down the block. And then there's homegrown hops. He's missing just like us. Yo, I don't know, I can't see, but then I hear Doc's little voice in my ear. And then who's gonna be out in the desert with me? The BN, got me going for a silver or gold. The BN, but do I bitch warm or cold? The BN, crew, get unrefined. The Brewing Network, I'm saving 5 gallons at a time. The BN, got me going for a silver or gold. The BN, don't know the bitch warm or cold. The BN, crew, get unrefined. The Brewing Network, I'm saving 5 gallons at a time. Drink, motherfucker, drink, motherfucker.
I could have mixed it with chocolate and vagina. It still wouldn't have helped.
Drink!
And now, back to the Brewcasters.
And the Yeast Show on the Sunday Brewcast right here on the Brewing Network. I've got Chris and Mike White with us today, and we're going to talk all things yeast. You can call us at 888-401-BEER. You can join us in the chat room and ask Daniela the questions. She'll pass them along, or you can Skype us at the Brewing Network. And I've already got a bunch in front of me for you guys, too. I was telling Mike earlier, Chris, before you got here, that we had a little time there. That I even got emails and people sending in questions ahead of time. So everyone was real excited about getting you guys in here.
Great.
Now, you've done our show before, but you did it over the phone last time. How do you feel about being in the Brewcast studio with us?
I like the studio.
It's fun, huh?
Oh, it's professional.
You can drink with us now?
That's right. I'm not in my living room.
No. Although we practically are. So it's almost the same. Chris Graham likes to come into the studio and hang out with us.
So much better than Skype.
Yes, absolutely. All right, so I got a few questions lined up in front of me. Did you get Crotch Rot's question through to you, Daniela, back in the...
He's just messing with me right now, so I have to get through to him again.
He'll just have him type it out or something so we can get to that whole
Sure.
thing. Although I do know that one thing that he was getting at is, and people have already been asking about this, and the question is about reusing yeast. A lot of people want to know how to do it as home brewers, because professionals do it all the time. So we've talked about before on the show about yeast washing, because you want to kind of get the junk from your last beer off of the yeast, essentially. So we've talked about different methods. People want to know what are the ways to do it. Is there a good way to wash our yeast so that we can reuse it?
I would say washing yeast is one of those things that is not really that important.
Okay.
It was invented, it was done more commonly in the 1800s and obviously since then, but to remove lactic acid bacteria.
Okay.
Because when you wash, especially when you acid wash, you bring the pH down to 2.2, 2.0, 2.2, a lot of bacteria die, or at least get knocked down a little bit. So and so then you could reuse the yeast and have less contribution from the lactic acid bacteria. But with today's brewing practices and even in home brewing, when you can collect yeast in a pretty clean way, you don't necessarily need to acid wash, and it's fairly aggressive on the yeast. And even if you just wash without the acid, if you're just washing to remove protein, it's really not. It's an extra step that can introduce more problems and contamination. That's really not necessary. So you've got some hops and trub there.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't really matter, and it doesn't really hurt the yeast. The little bit of trub that's there is actually a good fatty acid material for the yeast that they can use and metabolize a little bit for their own cells. So as a nitrogen source as well. So there's a lot there that's actually good for the yeast.
Okay. See, because I think what people they want to take it and then store it in the fridge for a while, right? Because what I do, and people give me shit about this. Some people say it's great. A lot of people say you shouldn't do that. I'll repitch right on top. I'll rack my beer off, and if I can brew, regularly enough, I'm just going to dump wort right on top of that old pitch if I can. I've done it a few times with Cal Ale, and I've not had a problem. But some people say I'm too dirty for doing that.
Well, you hear homebrewers doing that, and microbiologists will cringe at it because you're not cleaning anything really.
Yeah.
So if there is any problems in there, or it's not sterile to begin with, so there's always some bacteria and wild yeast around.
Okay.
So you're not cleaning the vessel, you're not getting the yeast out of there and then looking at it, but and it's something that professionals don't do either. It's really a homebrew thing because it just leads to too much yeast also.
Okay.
But a few times in homebrewing, it seems to work for a lot of people, and again, it's almost you're working with it less, so maybe it's okay.
Yeah.
You're manipulating it yet less. But if you continue to do that, it would really be overpitching because yeast grow 4 or 5 fold in a fermentation, and so you at least want to take that yeast out and split it into thirds or so.
Okay.
And so if you use all of it, you can just have some flavor problems from too much.
Okay. Well, now correct me if I'm wrong here, Doc. Make sure that I get this right, because we've had some folks on the show talk about when you take the yeast then out and you want to store it, that one way you should clean it, it's with distilled water, right, Doc? And you put it in a container with distilled water, and that will actually separate the trub from the yeast.
That's what Jamil does.
Yeah. So is that now? So you're saying that is even that's an unnecessary step?
Well, there's nothing wrong with doing that.
Okay.
But the benefits, I think may not outweigh the potential problems you can have. If you're an advanced brewer and you like working with yeast, and washing it, it'll perhaps give you a little bit longer shelf life in your refrigerator.
Okay.
But you really have to get the protein and things out. You have to get the distilled water, so you have to do it a few times.
Yeah.
3 times really, to just have it yeast and distilled water. And I think the data on the yeast living in distilled water is mixed. We've got lots of different results on it as well. So,
okay.
Whether yeast live any better in distilled water or in the wort that you collected from, I think is not really known.
Okay. So possibly longevity, but off flavors, not really.
Right.
Okay.
So you're more of an advocate of less handling.
Less handling. I think what happens, yeast can suffocate a little bit in storage and things. What you need to do is you need to crack that opening a lot, let the gas out, mix the yeast up a little bit, and once in a while perhaps even feed it. But which is more manipulation. So it's questionable whether you even should do that. But
yeah,
a lot of it is just getting rid of the gas. And by perhaps if you are washing in distilled water, you're also going to have less food sources there, so you will create less gas. But if you just release the gas once a day,
then it's not so bad anyway.
Right.
Okay.
You're already doing that, aren't you?
At least. Just once every few minutes, right? Daniela?
Yeast have a problem too.
Yeah. Yes, they do. Well, now, I've had a lot of conversations about the questions that we're going to talk to Chris about today. And, I want to say that Chris is he's great at answering things in a very real way about what it is that he does. And some of the things I think him and I have kind of come to the conclusion very often that some of the things are best tested side by side, and that you should do it. You should possibly wash your yeast and brew a batch like that. And then on the next one you should just take it right from the troop. Don't wash it. Put it in the fridge, and when you're ready to brew with that one and see what flavor comes out. And I've got some specific questions in mind for you, Chris, that the same thing is going to come out, where you've even said to me, you know what, we've tested it and not really noticed much of a difference, but you should test it too, kind of find out. Okay, if you're going to harvest the yeast from your last batch, should we do it from our primary fermenter or our secondary fermenter? People want to know.
It's a good question. I get that a lot. You really want the most healthy yeast possible. And traditionally what you should do is let the yeast ferment out the beer, let the yeast drop in the primary fermenter, and then collect that yeast. It's the yeast that fermented the beer. It's dropping quickest, but after fermentation. So for an ale, that's 1 day after fermentation. For a lager, say 4 or 5 days after fermentation. You collect that yeast, and that is the most healthy, the best. The yeast that's still in solution that may drop out later in cold conditioning or secondary is yeast that's not very flocculent, yeast that's going to be slow to attenuate, and a little bit smaller cells when you look at them in the microscope. And so I suggest the primary, if it's done where you let fermentation finish out. If you're taking yeast, you shouldn't really be taking yeast I don't think you should really transfer a beer before the end of fermentation anyway. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you'll be dealing with such flocculent yeast that will start dropping out midway through fermentation. And if you transfer it then and don't take that yeast with it, you're going to have a hard time finishing out that beer.
Okay.
So that's another thing that can introduce more problems by trying to transfer a beer too early.
Sure. You definitely want to wait.
Yes.
Now, Doc, you do repitching sometimes, right?
Sometimes.
What do you do? Do you clean your yeast? Do you take it from secondary? What's your method?
No, I have the conical, so I try to separate it out, and most of the stuff I don't want comes out first.
Okay.
And then I'll usually take the second pitch.
Yeah.
I have a sight glass that goes on the bottom of my conical, so 1.25 inches and probably 6 inches long, and it goes into there, and I can see what the layers look like, and I can take different segments of that.
Yeah.
And then I cap both sides of it. Use that.
Now, if I got a conical, would I also have a 6-inch long thing?
Yeah, probably.
If I bought it from B3? Is that the standard?
We built that for Doc, but I've built that for a lot of other people too.
Okay. It tends to be, like, I get all those emails about Viagra and everything else, and I think that Doc came to B3 with the same kind of problem. It's like, I obviously have a problem, and I definitely got to be 6 inches of something.
Yeah. And it's not so much the 6-inch part, but it's 1.25 inches in diameter.
Right. That actually is important.
Nice.
Because what's the point if you can't hit the sides?
Right.
Yeah.
I'll try to end this part of the discussion, everyone.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I'll chime in for a second from the shop's perspective. Mm-hmm. Think of this, people, before you go to your shop and start complaining that either you made a bad batch from reusing yeast too many times or having a ton of questions. Think of it this way: is almost I've been around homebrewing for 14 years, and I've just do it day in, day out. Most people who brew a lot will tell you that rarely does a brew day go the same. So if you say you do the same experiment, 4 batches in a row, but trying different things, chances are they're 4 different beers.
Yeah.
You probably timing on one thing, maybe an ingredient change because the supplier was out or whatever.
Yeah.
So keep all that in mind. Yeast is probably one of the least expensive things in your batch of beer.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind. But it's the only thing you can reuse. Nobody reuses hops. You can't reuse malt. Right. But yeast, since you can reuse it, everyone wants to.
Yeah.
I see a lot of people trying to go right on top of their last beer. know what your last beer tastes like before you do that. Because if you had bacteria problems, guess what? It's compounded probably, how many times, Chris, do you think, it's going to be worse in the second one?
Yeah, it just keeps getting worse second and third time. By the third time, probably undrinkable.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Okay.
And you'll hear a lot of breweries going through 16, 17 generations. They're hopefully using microscopes. They're hopefully, knowing what they're doing, feeding the proper nutrients. Things like Cervomyces is going to help out quite a bit.
Yeah.
Another great White Labs product.
The Servo.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then knowing proper ways of leaving behind as much protein between your boil kettle and your fermenter, leaving the hops out of it. Those are all things that are going to allow you. And the most important thing is time. If you're not going to brew but once every 2 months, don't try to reuse your yeast. That's ridiculous.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't even try if I'm going to be doing, batches that far apart. If I'm going to be doing 1 week and then the next week, I might try it, but it's not that big a deal. I could just do a yeast starter, or I'll reculture.
Yeah.
And grow it up from a culture. I have slants at home. I'll use those and culture up.
Yeah. And kind of know yourself. If, this is a great hobby, and there's so many aspects of the hobby you could be into. I know guys who build microprocessor chips to control their temp during fermentation of the refrigerator, raise and lower it. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But yet they don't know a single thing about how to handle yeast properly.
Right.
So know that. Know to just pitch the vial right in there instead of trying to harvest and to regrow. Know your strengths, know your weaknesses, and work around that.
And by the way, Chris was, what he was thinking in his head there was plugging in Justin for every one of those sentences. Justin, know yourself. Justin, just pitch the vial.
Hey, you hear what you want to hear, pal.
Well, when Justin, I think your idea here is not when you pitch on top of it because you're frugal.
Yeah. No, it's not.
Frugal with an L.
It's because you can do it. It's usually why people do it.
Well, it's easy.
It's right.
He doesn't have to. He's lazy. He doesn't have to wash the carboy, and he doesn't have to make a yeast starter.
Correct.
And
I know I'm going to get a fast fermentation.
Fast fermentation,
Mm-hmm.
and you could have beer in his glass that much quicker.
You're right. Although I completely agree with Chris Graham, and I'm glad that you did point that out, because I do know that as I'm pitching on my last batch, I know that if that batch had anything wrong with it, so is the wort that I'm going to throw on there. But because of all the problems that I have with brewing, contamination has never been one of them. I'm sort of rolling the dice every time and just assuming that my practices are consistent and I'm going to be fine with contamination. But I'm definitely I'm sort of weighing the risk with my laziness and realizing that if I want a nice fast fermentation start, but I've not done a starter, it's a easy way for me to do it is to go ahead and gamble and throw it right on top of that yeast.
Well, Scott will tell you, I'm as lazy as it gets.
Mm-hmm. You'll find an easier way every time.
I'm anal retentive about sanitization, but I'm lazy as it gets when it comes to most things. So making a starter is way too much work for me. I just pitch 3 vials.
Right.
It's just a lot easier.
Wow. All right, and we're going to talk about that later,
he owns his own homebrew
too.
store. He can do that.
We're definitely going to talk about pitching vials.
I think, and when you talk about repitching, it's yeast handling, and that's why the more we know about yeast handling and how to use yeast, you're going to understand some of the ways to reuse yeast. But it's yeast handling and it's the microbiology of preventing contamination. There's really 2 things.
Yeah.
You're trying to keep the yeast healthy and happy, so it can do that next fermentation. Because it doesn't really like it after the end of fermentation. Yeast has been in an anaerobic environment. There's alcohol around, and so they're a little stressed out, and so they start dying off a little faster. And so there's the stress there, and then you try to store them, and then they die. And so yeast storage is also about how healthy was the fermentation itself.
Yeah.
But then you've also got the other. So there's the handling, and then there's the contamination. So. And sometimes they're related. If the yeast is not very healthy, it's not going to fend off bacteria and wild yeast. So the culture can become contaminated if it's not very healthy.
Yeah.
And sometimes a healthy culture can become contaminated because of handling techniques.
Okay. None of Doc's have ever been contaminated because Doc is our in-house genius, and I'm sure that all of your yeast that you keep on slants has been perfect every time. Right, Doc?
Yeah, or I don't use it. Or I reculture it out and then cut out the bad parts.
Yeah.
But I think you don't have contamination problems because you're such a germaphobe.
Exactly. I'm really relating to Chris Graham by saying that, yes, I'm lazy, but I'm very anal retentive about sanitation, and yeah, I'm a germaphobe, and I'm cleaning everything all the time. So I'm pretty good about that.
Yeah.
Mike White, did Chris White bore you to death as a child? Because he's such a he's a chemist. I mean, let's face it. I mean, I can hang out with Doc and have fun because he likes to drink beer, but if he starts talking med school with me, I don't hear a word. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, I want to know who got the chicks.
No, I have to keep the attention here because if Chris can't think of the answer, he's going to turn to me.
Yeah.
And I've got to fill in the blanks.
Right.
And
You're
that
the go-to guy.
That happens quite often, so that's why I'm staying keeping a keen ear to everything that is going on.
As you should. The man needs checks and balances, especially because I just give him carte blanche. Like, whatever he says, it's got to be right. The sun is headed toward the earth. Okay.
Right, and he's going to kind of look at me, and I've got to give him the nod if it's correct.
Yeah.
I've sort of noticed that a lot.
Yeah. Now, you've actually just started working with the company, Mike. How long have you been working with the company now?
I've been working with the company since January, but I've been affiliated or I've been around, obviously, since the beginning. I saw Chris start the company on the side out of his house with a few friends, and I saw it grow to what really people didn't expect.
Right.
Certainly in the beginning when things were really tough, and except him, he always believed in it. And
somebody had to.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I've become more involved over the years. I do the White Labs newsletter.
Okay.
And things of those nature. I work on the web.
Does that mean you work in the mailroom?
Yeah.
The digital one.
Nepotism. I got my brother a job in the mailroom.
It's a complicated mailroom. I know the newsletters, Mike.
Yes.
It's a complicated mailroom.
Maybe not for everybody.
Here's what you can go to whitelabs.com. It is just whitelabs.com, isn't it? We've also got their logo right on our main page, and you can click on that and sign up for the newsletter. I actually hadn't realized that you guys had a newsletter. I was reading through it to prepare for the interview, and it's a great newsletter. You got a lot of information in there.
Yes.
So you can sign up for that. Thinking, so you kind of, you figured I better keep my job because if Chris totally fucks up, like, at least that's only on him. But if it goes well, then maybe I'll help the guy out.
Well, the company is grown to a point where I can be useful in a lot of different things, and so that's why I'm working with them now.
I think that's cool. I tell you, my ideal situation, if I could employ my brother, get him on board, and afford to pay the man, honestly, I think that it's great to have a family business like that, and I'd do it in a second. You know, I really think it's cool, and I think that you guys know each other better than, say, some other kind of a partner that you're just kind of taking on out of nowhere, and I think it's a cool thing. I was actually, it was a heartwarming story for me, Doc.
Yeah.
It would be great if you could start paying me.
Yeah, that'd
for
be
a
cool.
start.
That'd kind of be cool.
And Dr. Scott.
Yeah, what the heck?
Scott, how many brothers do you employ?
Yeah, see?
Exactly.
Wait, I've met his brothers. Sorry. Sorry, Dave.
I think Dave's in the chat room.
888-401-BEER is the number if you want to call in and ask any questions you got there.
I was just going to say it was a kind of difficult thing to hire Mike because he had been in journalism as a newspaper writer since we were both at college together at Davis, and I got into beer and science and things, and he got into newspaper writing. And to say, Mike, why don't you stop doing that and come full time with us?
Sure.
And so, but I was confident enough at the time to do it, but it took a few years to be able to do that. But in the last few months, he's really been working a lot on our website, and we were hoping that new site would be up today, but it'll be a couple more days still. But just looks the same, but a lot more content.
Oh, beautiful.
That Mike added. Cool.
All right. Good work. And that's all. I mean, it's really important, especially for a business like yours, and you can tell by the show that we do here when people are going to call and ask all these questions. Your website's all important because when people think White Labs and they have questions, they want to go there and see it. So that's kind of invaluable to be updating that. And sign up for the newsletter, whitelabs.com, or just click the White Labs logo. All right, real quick, back to the harvesting of your yeast that you've already used. People want to know what's the best way to get the yeast from their carboy or plastic bucket, and the best media then to store it in. How should we go about doing that?
Well, there's just so many different types of fermenters. I mean, glass carboys, plastic carboys, conical.
Yeah.
You want to get the yeast out. I mean, it's simple as, say, in a glass carboy, racking off the beer, to a little bit above the yeast, stirring up the yeast, pouring that into a sanitized container.
Okay.
And
glass container?
Glass. Glass would be best.
Okay.
I'd like a sterile container, but it's pretty hard to get in the home situation and home kitchen situation. But if you have a pressure cooker, you can pressure cook certain glass. And that's the best way to go. If you really want to start working with yeast and growing yeast and doing different things, a pressure cooker can be very useful.
Okay.
But when you're harvesting yeast from the fermenter, now you've got a lot of yeast. You're not on the growing side, you're on the collecting side. So you do have a little bit more leeway, because you've got just billions of yeast cells compared to any bacteria or wild yeast, hopefully.
Yeah.
There. So, but once you collect that yeast, now then you can put it in the fridge, vent that a few times, because especially when you first collect it, it creates a lot of gas. So later on it can be once a day, but early on you want to vent that quite a bit. But then by the next day you can look at it. How much liquid to yeast do you have there? Did you get a good culture, or did you get too much liquid?
Okay.
How does yeast look? Is it got a lot of trube there, or is it good creamy yeast? Even if you use different nutrients, you can sometimes tell the yeast looks creamier, or it looks a little bit different, or the beer style you made.
Okay. If that were to happen, is that maybe a time that you would want to maybe cut it with some distilled water or something? If it were a little too much, if it looked a little too diluted?
Yeah, you could
dilute it more.
Well, no, then it floats to the top, right? And you pour it off, and you have the yeast at the bottom.
Well, I thought, if you pour off what's in there, and if you pour too much or something, you could add some distilled water. Again, you'd have to have it sterile.
Yeah.
Or close to as possible.
Yeah.
Sanitized.
Yeah.
But, you can add, if you have too much protein on top, if it's too much of a brown layer, you might want to add distilled water, but still, when do you do that, and how much is too much? So I think it's kind of questionable.
Okay.
So when Chris was talking about sterilized, he means sterilized.
Yeah.
He means through a pressure cooker or an autoclave where heat, pressure sterilization.
Not sanitized.
Not just washed out and thrown in some star sand. He's talking clean.
Yeah. And Jamil does that. Jamil is actually a big advocate of his pressure cooker and sterilizing thing. He sterilizes all of his utensils, and
we don't need to do it for everything in the brewing situation, but if you're going to start culturing yeast and pulling yeast up, really messing with it, get a pressure cooker, because you really want to have your vessels clean,
right,
and sterilized.
And think of some of the practical things. So if you're siphoning off your carboy, let's say it's a 5-gallon carboy, and you're just letting regular old air replace the liquid that was in there.
Yeah.
Especially if you're in your kitchen, which is just a microbial, playground.
Sure.
Or bathrooms, even better. All that air that's going in there is full of airborne yeast and bacteria. So be smart about that. If you're siphoning off, use things like a hood with a sterile air filter. Wow, that's a tough one.
Yeah, that is rough.
And
it's like framboise.
Exactly. And then so that way, as the liquid level goes down, it's filled with sterile air instead of with just regular air that could, contaminate your next beer.
Sure. Is it true? I've heard this deal, and it's why you have bottle trees, or they say when you sterilize or rather sanitize your bottles, you should maybe put them in the dishwasher rack. Is it true that the bacteria can't go up? Is that why you should everything should be upside down?
Bacteria doesn't necessarily fly.
Yeah.
Rushes of air can cause it to go any way it goes, but generally,
it's floating in general, right?
Chris?
Well, it's usually floating down on dust.
Yeah.
So that's unless you can obviously have airflow in your house or fans that can change things. So when you are doing certain yeast things, you like to prevent air currents and close windows and turn off fans. But so in a room without a lot of airflow, you're going to have yeast floating down. So whether how much you get going up into a bottle.
Yeah. It's the safest way to keep it upside down.
Yeah.
Right.
It's better than right side up where things can just drop right into it.
Yeah. What if I'm passing gas as I'm doing all these things? Do I increase my risk of contamination?
Of course.
I do.
It depends on the vortex.
Yeah.
And how much flow you get.
And the aim.
Yeah. Definitely the propulsion. All right. How long can we store yeast? If we take it from our primary or so, and we want to store it to use it the next time, what's kind of the average?
He's going to say it depends.
Well, that depends.
Okay.
And it's because it's another one of those yeast handling, yeast health issues. How healthy was it the last batch? Maybe the last batch before that.
Yeah.
What kind of manipulation was done? What kind of fermentation temperature? So lots of these little things. Again, what it means is there's no right answer on how long.
Okay.
But in terms of storing yeast, usually if you store it, if it's reasonably healthy, textbooks would tell you 3 days. But generally it's under 2 weeks. People don't experience problems with yeast just dying off very quickly within 2 weeks.
Okay.
But over 2 weeks, it can become a question of all these other factors, because generally when you collect yeast from a fermenter and a month later it's half dead. If it was a healthy population of yeast out of the fermenter.
Is that at any specific temperature? Like, say if you stored it cold, is
cold
it
temperatures.
Okay, not just leaving it room temperature on the bench there.
Right. So, after 2 weeks and you start approaching that month, so it's half dead. Well, if you have a lot of it, you could still use that yeast. That's why some people say, I use yeast in a month or two and it still works pretty good.
Right.
So it was probably pretty healthy when they collected it. Maybe they kept some gas off of it, and then they used enough of it. So,
well, plus the overpitching factor you were saying, because if yeast can grow 4 to 5 times during fermentation, it being half dead isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Right.
Although, what about the effect of having dead yeast in the beer? Because I've heard about yeast autolysis and eating dead yeast and
absolutely. So here's the issue here. You use yeast that's a month old and it's half alive.
Yeah.
So you use a lot of it, and sure, you get the numbers to be right, and fermentation takes off. But those that are half, so how healthy is the population that's half alive?
Yeah. Okay.
And that's very hard to quantitate.
Sure.
And figure out. So what you see is how your fermentation goes, and that sort of tells you.
Yeah.
But it can be off flavors, or it can be fine.
Yeah. Although it sounds to me like if it's half dead, the half that's alive can't be doing too great. Like if half of it's going to die, right? Then the other half is just clinging like to life, right?
Right.
So the other half looks like me.
Yeah, that's the vitality part of it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So maybe so a month is about you're really pushing.
Can you bring them back to life? Starting with a new starter, refeeding them and working them up, and put them in the gym.
If you grow them up, you can always do a lot more damage to yeast because you're going to create new cells. If you're always trying to store a big population and do nothing to it and use that population again, then it can be more tricky, and then the viability and vitality are big issues.
Yeah.
But if you try to do at least even a one-step propagation or starter, is going to waken the yeast from this dormancy that they've been in the cold, and it's the same thing with using our yeast off the shelf. And people make starters. Some of the people that make starters, it's not necessarily creating new cells, but it can be waking the yeast up.
Yeah.
And that's why they see a difference in fermentation if they do.
So what's the minimum time you would say? Say you're not looking to propagate or grow them up, but you want to wake up that tube. You're going to make a starter, maybe 1,000 milliliters. Pour a tube in it. What's your minimum time ahead of time? Your brew time? Would you say 24 hours?
I would say 24 hours. I like to do everything with yeast in 2 days, though. I like 48 hours.
Okay.
I think that gives yeast good times to do certain things that they need to do. And 1 day is the minimum, 2 days, and then 3 days is about the maximum.
And that's just to wake them up and not really propagate into more cells.
Right. And just waking up, that can happen in 6 hours. You don't necessarily need 48. I just simplify things, and when I was doing more yeast manipulation for homebrewing, and I still kind of believe this, that 1 or 2 days is the best.
Took me 6 hours to wake up this morning. Really took a long time.
You still don't like you're awake.
I've been drinking for days.
Yeah.
I want you to hold off because I definitely want to talk about the starters and even waking it up within the vial, and I want to do that when we come back. We got to take a quick break. We should wrap up though the sort of reusing yeast discussion because I got just a couple more quick questions. What temperature should we be storing this yeast if we are going to do it?
When you're not fermenting with yeast, you always want to store it as cold as possible. In your refrigerator, 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and as close to freezing as possible without freezing it.
Okay. And then the last thing, can a home brewer check the health of their yeast with a microscope?
Absolutely. And over the course of the show, you're going to hear a lot of questions, and almost every question I could answer by saying you have to check with a microscope.
Okay.
And if it became a more regular thing, people would learn a lot more about their brewing practices and their fermentations, because you're dealing with a microorganism you can't see.
Yeah.
So now we've had the technology to see yeast for 400 years. So if we can take advantage of that as homebrewers now and see the yeast, you're really going to understand when you damage it. You'll see it get a little bit, when it's stressed out, for example, instead of being round, it'll be a little bit longer.
Oh.
It'll stretch out a little bit. And little things like that. You'll see you can use some simple dyes, methylene blue dye, and the procedures, I think, are even on our website, but you can see the viability of the yeast. You can see how alive they are. There are some things you can't test for very easily, but just looking at the sample, and not even on the microbiology side, not even to see about contamination, because that's a different ballgame, but just to look at yeast health, it's a fairly inexpensive microscope that can be for under a couple $100. You're going to find microscopes that are you don't even need one that has a power source.
I would guess that your local community college wouldn't mind you going in the lab and borrowing a little a microscope right there too.
Well, except that
lab time.
I think if you're going to use it, it's not something you do once in a while, or you store in a cupboard that's hard to get to, because then it's just too much of a hassle to use it.
Yeah.
If you have the microscope out with your regular brewing equipment, and you just you kind of used to using the microscope as a regular part of your practice, it takes you 5 minutes to do it. It's not something that seems difficult.
Yeah.
And if you're going to store yeast, for example, you pull it out and you take a look at it.
Right.
And then you use it. And all these questions of, how do I know if it's alive, or how long can I store it, all these things, when there's no right answers, you know by then looking at your culture and knowing if what you did worked.
Absolutely.
I think Chris is making a fantastic point there, because we're so concerned about everything in our brew process, and we try to be so aware of all the things.
Yeah.
But looking at the yeast actually is really going to help you to understand what it does and really tell you if you should use this one or not.
Yeah.
And I think it sounds like really a lot of fun too. We're going to get a microscope.
I think you should. And I've often wondered why commercial brewers don't have microscopes.
They don't?
And a lot of commercial brewers, small microbreweries, when, again, they have problems that affect thousands of dollars worth of ingredients and time, when they could have solved those problems with a microscope. And I think it's a fewfold why traditionally brewers weren't the ones handling yeast.
Yeah.
Brewers understand malt and hops and very hot side issues of boil and things like that. And it was the cellar people and the fermentation people that actually handle the fermentation, and the lab people.
Yeah.
Well, now you have the microbreweries and the brew pubs that the brewer is the microbiologist, is everything, and the salesperson and GM and whatever.
Yeah.
So they don't have the microbiology background or really interest even to pursue it, or time, perhaps.
Chris just said that brewers are dumb. He did. I don't know if you guys heard that, but that's what I heard.
No, he said
lazy.
He said that they're pragmatic.
Overworked.
Yeah, they're pragmatic. I'm sorry.
Hey, let's clarify that. Chris White said that.
No, that's an excellent point. I'm actually thinking that brewers, in this case, actually then just take the convenience of putting their trust into companies like you, or whatever company it is that supplies the yeast. But which is excellent to a point. But like you said, if something goes wrong at any point in the process, they probably could have avoided it if they just took a look and then knew what they were looking at.
Right, and if once you do that, it's, like I said, very routine. I went in a Gordon Biersch recently, and the brewer, he poured off a Hefeweizen. This was the Gordon Biersch in San Diego, and the brewer there had just made a new beer, and it was fairly yeasty. And I asked him, he asked me how much yeast I thought was in suspension.
Yeah.
And we made a couple of guesses, and he said, well, let's go look at it. And we just went in the back. He threw a sample into the microscope.
Right.
And he took a count. He wanted to see how close he was going to be to my count as well.
Okay.
And they were very much the same. But it took him just about 5 minutes, because he regularly does this.
Sure.
And now he knows when he looks at a glass of beer, how right he was in terms of how much yeast was in there.
Yeah.
Just one other little question he answered very quickly by looking at his beer.
Yeah, and just like you said, that they're used to doing it. That's great.
Right.
What power microscope would you suggest on that?
400 power is all you need to see yeast. 500.
Okay.
X. So
we're still gonna
40X.
get a microscope.
All right.
That sounds awesome. We're gonna look at all the stuff in our
You'll
house.
be on eBay in no time.
Yeah, I'm on eBay
Justin,
right now.
you sound far too excited
Yeah,
about this.
I'm not looking at a microscope.
She's probably look at other cells, Justin.
Yeah, I'll be looking at. I'll just be like grabbing, poop or something.
That wasn't what I was thinking.
Justin, I think you and I are a lot alike in terms of like certain things we want to know about and certain things we just don't.
Yeah.
I always liken yeast to kids. It's like you can treat kids differently and or you treat them all the same and they're going to come out different.
Yeah.
Yeast is the same to me. Like really, that's the way I treat yeast is I'm scared of it more than anything, just like kids.
No, I'm leaving it to Chris.
What's that?
I'm just leaving it to
That's what I mean.
Chris
So
White,
it's easier for me to start over every time than to try to like perpetuate these things and grow them or store them or any of that. Just scares the hell out of me.
But I do love that people, and this is often what it comes down to when I have conversations about yeast and stuff with Chris and whether or not to do starters and all that, which we are going to get into. I do love that everyone has the ability to do it. If you want to do it, if you want to manipulate it, if you want to store it, if you want to reuse it, if you want to propagate it, you can. You really can, and the resources are out there for you to do it. And like even the microscope isn't that powerful of a microscope, really, like you're saying. So.
Right? No. And they're not very expensive either. So, but the fact
we don't need an EM then.
No, and another reason I think a lot of people don't use them is you can make beer without them.
Yeah.
Otherwise, everybody would have one.
Sure.
But you could make 99 great batches maybe, but what about that one? Or what if you can improve 10% of your beers even just that way? It's improvements and it's preventing. So there's the preventing contamination issue, which people think about the microscope, but I think it's more important from a yeast health aspect. Yeah. And we know a lot of flavors in our beers come from yeast. And so if we can make our yeast more consistent and our flavors more consistent by looking at the yeast.
Yeah. Now, Mike, I hope I'm not putting you on the spot here. I know you're about to do the new website. Personally, in Chris mentioning that the actual shape that the yeast should look like and what it should look like, I would really love to be able to go to White Labs and see a picture of a healthy yeast cell next to an unhealthy yeast cell, mostly because I can hardly read and I'm really picture oriented. But since apparently we're getting a friggin' microscope and I got to look at these things, I'd really like to know exactly what I'm looking for.
It's round with a little tail.
The problem is the problem is if you go to White Labs, you're only going to see healthy cells.
I see.
So I'll have to go elsewhere. I'll have to go somewhere to find an unhealthy one.
Just label it accordingly. Say this is a White Labs yeast cell and this is a X company's yeast cell, and that would be fine, right? And it'd kind of be funny too. You could even make shirts out of it.
It's a good idea. We do have a camera on our microscope hooked to a computer and things like that. We could start taking some more pictures for that viewpoint of putting on the web. And we actually do get a lot of contaminated beer sent to us because we do a lot of testing. That's another thing we do for commercial breweries is testing of their beer samples. And usually they're sending us beer samples because there's a problem.
Right.
Not a lot of people do regular maintenance.
We only get beer samples because there's a problem.
Right. Yeah, you gave me a bad sample. You gave me a bad batch of yeast.
One of the problems you have when you look at it under a microscope, you can tell it's unhealthy, but you don't necessarily know why because you have to ask questions about the process.
You're right, yeah. Yeah, that's true, because then, now it matches up to the ugly yeast cell. Now what? Yeah, you're right. Then you got a bunch of questions.
Having a rack of slides that you could see on your website would be cool. Like, what am I looking at? Usually when I'm looking at a microscope, it's pink dots and purple swirls. So, cool. But if you got a few things on your website that it's got, this is contamination. You got all the different kind of things, that would help quite a bit for all those guys you've just made by microscopes.
Right. Yeah. Well, you can tell wild yeast too. I mean, even Hefeweizen yeast looks different than English ale yeast or California ale yeast. The Hefeweizen is a little bit more oblong. It sticks together as chains. And lots of little differences like that. I think it would be neat to show on the website.
Okay. Mike, you just got a bunch more work piled on top of you. Sorry, brother.
I think it's a good idea, though. I'm going to be excited about that.
This is Mike.
Put the stuff under the microscope and look at everything from your body and all that, and then the yeast, that's going to be cool.
This is Mike's head speaking. I hate this show, and Justin is stupid. We're talking to Mike and Chris White from White Labs Yeast Company, and I got a pile of questions in front of me for you guys, so I got lots to get to. We're going to talk about a lot of things like warm versus cold pitching and yeast starters and all sorts of good stuff. You're tuned in the Brewing Network.
You're listening to the Brewcasters. The Brewcasters on the Brewing Network.
A couple things to consider. One is sometimes people focus too much on the need to reduce the lag time. It's important not to have a really long lag time, but there's a practical limit. You want a good, healthy start more than you want a super fart.
I like that.
I said fart.
Buddy, better fix that door.
You better get out of my general store.
You sold me one, you can sell me one more.
I ain't gonna sell you no beer no more.
D-Y. Too drunk to think about it, might as well try. 100 pretty ladies and they're giving me the eye.
But I told you once, I told you twice. Drinking and driving is a bad man's vice.
Left, left, right. And a right, right, left. My plate.
You can go up a while, but don't be late.
We're going driving on the interstate.
You can take my price and just close the gate.
Hey, right. Too drunk to think about it, might as well try. There's a million pretty ladies and they're giving me the eye.
Boys be boys, men will be men. Know what you did, so don't do it again.
Gonna do it again. Gonna do it again. What do you know?
You're on the interstate and you're going slow.
I missed my turn. Which way do I go?
Step out of the car. You're going to jail.
No! D-Y. Too drunk to think about it. Might as well try. Cocaine Chardonnay 4th of July.
Walk the line, heel to toe. Tilt your head back and touch your nose.
What?
Walk the line, heel to toe. Tilt your head back and touch your nose.
What?
Walk the line, heel to toe. Tilt your head back and touch your nose. Recite backwards the alphabet.
Up yours, pig. You do that shit. D-Y. Too drunk to think about it. Might as well try. 100 pretty ladies and they're giving me the eye. Walk in line, heel to toe. Tilt my head back and I touch my nose. Walk in line, heel to toe. Better get far and go, do, go. Till my head back and I touch my nose. Walking the line, heel to toe. Till my head back and I touch my nose.
Put your hand on your hips, follow the pen.
I can't hear you, man. Say it again.
Put your hand on your hips and follow the pen.
I fucked your sister in the back of my van.
Put your hand on your hips and follow the light.
Sir, just wanna go home tonight. Leroy, do nothing about it, might as well try. Cocaine Chardonnay 4th of July.
I told you once, I told you twice.
Drinking and driving is a bad man's vice. Told you once, told you twice. Drinking and driving is a bad man's vice. Told you once, told you twice. Drinking and driving is a bad man's vice.
Back to the Brewcasters. The Brewcasters. On the Brewing Network.
The Brewcasters and Mike and Chris White are with us today. It's another great yeast show, and probably the best one we've done because we got the boys right here in the studio with us, and that makes for a good time because we get to hang out and we have good audio, and it's always fun that way. How are you feeling today, Dr. Scott?
Pretty good.
Yeah?
Actually, just another Sunday roll on by, and is looking forward to getting back here in the studio.
We missed you last week.
Well, it was either this week or last week, and I don't know how the hell I got my wife to change our plans. Cause
yeah, that's a good question. I know that we talked about it at the last show you were at. We said, now, if you got to miss a week, don't make it the Whites week.
And I didn't. He tells me that like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And
you say,
they're coming in the studio. They come in and I go, well, I'll see if I can change the family plans because we're going away for 3 days.
But we're both thinking like, okay, we're saying he's going to try, but we also know it's
I almost
slim.
didn't want to ask, but you know what? I just rifled it through, and we changed our plans to last weekend instead of this weekend.
All
so
right.
I could be here.
Wait, you give him 2 weeks notice on things?
Occasionally.
Because usually Justin calls me Saturday night.
Yeah. I only. Yeah.
No, actually, you called me yesterday about noon.
No, see, Doc has evolved to that point because there was a time when he only got the Saturday night notice too. You'll get there, Chris.
Sometimes I would get the Sunday at 4 o'clock.
Yeah. You got to pay your dues, man.
Oh, true. Don't discount that.
That's right. You don't just get freebie advance notice.
I want to make an announcement. Chris was talking earlier about his kids scaring him. Well, last weekend he got engaged.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Yep.
What?
No kidding, Chris Graham got engaged.
Congratulations,
Chris.
Congratulations all the way around.
Through some cojones and
wow.
There's going to be a Mrs. Graham.
Finally went
not
for
German.
Damn it.
So, how long till you're spitting out little children?
Oh, God.
Little kinderen.
God. I'm afraid to make yeast starters, let alone have kids.
Yeah.
What about little Travis, though, Chris?
Travis, the pink penis alien.
He's going to get all upset.
That scares me, too.
Kids don't have to be that sterile. And believe me, they're not.
All right. I got a lot of topics I want to talk about. I keep getting questions about the storage, so let's try to do these quick. How long can yeast be stored on slants? What's the lifespan there? And I know it probably depends on the cleanliness, too. But on average, what are we looking at?
Well, again, a textbook answer would be 6 months to a year, depending on, again, the health of the yeast a little bit when you put it on the slant, but it grows on the slant. So you get some new cells. That's sort of the beauty. You get new cells on the slant, and then if you keep it sealed, you've got a nutrient source that doesn't really dry out too. So generally 6 months to a year, and then plates dry out a little faster, and they're under 6 months.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that the yeast is fine, even if it's alive. Again, if it's on a slant or a plate, something you're storing in a refrigerator on agar media, it means it's growing. It grows very slowly because it's in the fridge, but it grows, and so it changes, and you get mutation.
Okay.
For an individual brewer or home brewer, maybe that won't matter too much because you could go get it again if it's not something super valuable. For a commercial brewery, it's important that it doesn't change at all. So even some bigger breweries that may store their yeast on slants like that will then store them with us to store them at almost cryogenic temperatures. So there is no change. And so we store a lot of yeast for people that don't even buy yeast from us.
Okay.
Just as another bank that they store their yeast at.
Gotcha.
And because you'll see mutation even after 2 months sometimes. And so again, it depends on the application. For us, somebody like us, where we make our business selling yeast, and that yeast has to be the same as it was 2 years ago or 5 years ago, then we need to store them at these very, very minus 80 degrees Celsius is generally what people store yeast at.
Yeah.
You can go colder too.
Hey, my freezer doesn't go that cold.
Yeah, that's some serious cold right there.
Right, and so people hear about freezing yeast, so they say, well, what about my freezer?
Yeah.
And the only reason that really doesn't work, it's really not cold enough.
Yeah.
And also to arrest yeast, and also you have, most freezers are freeze thaw, so that freeze thaw process just eats up the yeast very quickly from ice crystals.
Yeah.
So that super cold minus 80 degrees Celsius prevents the ice crystals. They freeze so fast, ice crystals don't form. You also have some glycerol in there that prevent the ice crystals. So you pull them out in very healthy shape, where you can't do that with human cells and tissues and things. So, that makes yeast fairly unique.
But I bet you still have your head frozen when you die.
Probably not.
So is the fridge then just as good as the freezer since it's not cold enough in the freezer anyway?
Right.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's the same difference.
And then you don't get the ice crystals chewing up the cells.
Yeah.
Right.
Can I ask some temperature-related questions that are practical?
Please.
Let's look at the average home brewer who may not have a shop close to them and they have to buy yeast over the internet.
Mm-hmm.
What temperatures will kill yeast?
I had that question from the chat room too. That's great.
That's a good question, and it also involves shipping yeast, I think, and temperatures that yeast can handle. I answer a lot of technical questions as well. A lot of brewers, our office does a great job in answering most of the questions, but sometimes there's certain questions or just brewers want to talk to me or something. And so last week there was a brewer in Pittsburgh who had got his yeast a day late. And he was really concerned about it. And so instead of receiving his yeast on a Wednesday, he received it on a Thursday. And that happens with so many packages out there. FedEx trucks get broken tires and flat tires and things. It just happens every week that somebody happens to him. And he was really concerned. The yeast came a day late. Is it dead? And now he didn't have a microscope, so he couldn't really tell.
Yeah.
But that seemed kind of strange to him. But, I talked to him, and about half the yeast we ship goes that way anyway in 2 days.
Okay.
And so a lot of it's overnight, a lot of it's 2 days. A lot of it, if it's Australia or somewhere else overseas, will be 3 or 4 days. And the way we package it, and we try to keep it as cold as possible, and keeps it healthy, and also yeast are fairly hardy. So what you think can kill you sometimes doesn't, because they have a pretty thick cell wall, and they're fairly resistant to temperature changes and things, but they are single cells, so they can be sensitive to it as well. So it's a fairly complicated answer.
Yeah.
Scott, help me out here. He has to answer this one.
I'm
He's not allowed to skirt that rim.
Would you say better that you can't kill all of them?
Right. So if you
in the male anyway.
No, right. So if you have some cell death, if you're making a starter, you're doing something, you can usually repair anything. If you're not, again, you have to rely on that full population to do its thing. And if it's held for over 90 degrees Fahrenheit for an extended period of time, it's going to start dying. It loves 90 degrees. However, that also causes it to about 30 degrees Celsius, causes it to start trying to grow.
How long extended period of time? 4 days, 3 days, 2 days?
A day at near 100 would kill off most of the yeast.
Wow. Oh, wow.
So I'm trying to say this reverse engineered so homebrewers really understand this.
Yeah.
So, really, I try my best to encourage homebrewers to both separate their yeast from their order 2-day air, which most of them are not willing to pay for.
Right.
Because considering, your professional pitches are quite a bit more expensive because it's quite a bit.
Yeah.
2-day air is pretty cheap relative to the yeast.
Yeah.
A homebrewer is paying $5.95 or whatever for a pitch. All of a sudden trying to pay 2-day air at $19 is starting to go, well, no, I'm not going to do that. And they think, that I can ship it from California to New York in 100-degree weather, that it'll come there fine. I'm trying to let people kind of know you might want to consider at least priority mail, ice packs, that kind of stuff, because you can do a lot of damage.
Well, and that was the specific question that I got from a listener, and they were talking about B3 yeast because they apparently didn't take you up on the ice pack or the overnight. They said that they often receive yeast, and they've ordered it from B3, and I guess he's measured it, and he says it will be at about 100 degrees. That vial of yeast will be 100 degrees, and he's wondering if it's dead.
Right. If
there's no way to know without a microscope, right?
That's the, and you don't know how long it was at that temperature.
Yeah.
So if it's a little while, if it's under a day, it might not be that damaging. One of the answers to that is we hear very little. There's very few experiences where people do have enough cell death that they actually notice it in any shipping. Okay. And in the early 90s, when I was still thinking about starting White Labs, this was a big obstacle to me. I was thinking, okay, I'm going to make yeast in San Diego, and I'm going to try to ship it around the country and maybe the world, but how am I going to do that? How are you going to ship yeast?
Yeah.
So that's what I worked on for a while, and variety of methods, and it turns out it really, one of the biggest factors was how healthy it was when we shipped it. So I worked a lot on the media itself and the health of the yeast itself when we shipped it. But then these shipping companies that have sprung up too do such a great job. I mean, we are able to transport packages around the world so easily now, not just yeast, but consumer electronics and everything. It became not as much of an issue as I thought it was, in 93 or 94 when I was still thinking about White Labs and how am I going to ship yeast? I'm going to have to use dry ice, special carriers, and it's just not the case.
Okay.
What's your thoughts on acceptable lag times?
Well, I like 12 to 15 hours I think is good. I think when you start to get into 24 or 48, those are too long.
How do you define, in your mind, is it foam on top? Is it airlock activity? Is it?
A little bit of both to me. I think, airlock up, foam's coming on soon. So either one, but, you're seeing gas. CO2 starts coming off, yeast is expelling it. They've gone through their aerobic phase, well, not really aerobic anyway, but they've gone through their assimilation phase, and they've started to grow. They've depleted all the oxygen, and they're putting out CO2.
Okay.
And when you see the airlock activity.
Just so you know, I'm not grilling you as me. I'm grilling you as all my customers.
Sure.
Yeah.
So what about lag time for lager?
About the same. And so the only thing that makes a lager so different is the temperatures that you're dealing with.
What temperature do you recommend lager brewers pitch?
Hold on. I'm going to stop that question
Sorry.
Hang on.
Clang.
Now, the only reason I want to do that, because I do want to have that discussion, but I have a lot of questions here that are specifically about White Labs yeast. So I want to talk about your products, and then I want to get back into the cold, warm pitching temperature in general. Chris, you bastard. Not really. No, Chris, great questions, and obviously some of the most educated questions that come to the show, because Chris has to deal with them all day long too. So
he's just helping himself there.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Okay. So a few different questions. Just people are very curious about White Labs, and one of the things that you guys promote certainly is that people can brew authentic beers because you have authentic yeasts and specific to style. So people are curious about where the origin of your yeast strains are.
I've asked him that same question.
Have you?
The answer was it depends.
It's the It Depends show. I have some specific numbers, which I'll maybe throw at you after, but in general, people want to know, where does this yeast start?
Right, I do get that question a lot, and just take a step back a little bit. I mean, it really starts where it started in these various breweries, because you've had yeast that has been, people have been reusing yeast for hundreds and hundreds of years, and so, especially with ales, because they've had such a longer history, within individual breweries, you had different yeast strains develop over time just because they were reusing the yeast. And lager yeast, having such a very short history, there's not a large variety of lager yeast. It only made it out of Bohemia, I think, in the mid 1800s or so.
Okay.
And then started to be worked on in Denmark and spread around the world. So lager yeast hasn't had such a long history, and so there's not such a variety of lager strains. But when I started using yeast strains again in the early 90s, I started making trips to England and just in Europe, and buying yeast strains from yeast banks. And so most of the strains have actually come from yeast banks.
Okay.
Because you're back closer to the pedigree of where a strain would be from. If we just tried to get a strain of yeast out of a bottle of Sierra Nevada, for example, we could make some good homebrew out of it sometimes.
Right.
But it's not going to be genetically stable enough or close enough to what's used in the brewery, for example, to be... The yeast just tend not to work as well because they've also been in bottles and under stress.
Yeah.
So you need to go back to these yeast banks that started in the late 1800s and early 1900s in London and Netherlands and Munich.
Yeah.
And collect strains there.
Okay.
So we don't really those banks don't tell us where the origins are either.
Sure.
So
Okay.
people are asking us what are the origins. Say some of the lager strains, they're bought from yeast banks in Munich or Berlin.
Okay.
And so we can make guesses sometimes, sometimes we're told, and sometimes brewers give us yeast. So the other answer is each strain is a little bit different. Some have come from breweries, some have come from these yeast banks.
Okay.
I always had the picture of you and Mike over in Europe in a brewery, and you nudge him and you say, make him look the other way. And you guys just scrape some yeast into a petri dish and then run.
I saw them in ninja outfits and stealing it at night.
Yeah.
I have done a lot of that actually, and 99% of the times you get back and you work with those strains and they're terrible.
Really?
So all of that fun little work you're doing and
Yeah.
collecting yeast from even different taps and things in Europe, when you get back, and you start working with these yeast in the lab, they're either too contaminated or just too mutated to be of much value.
So where are you storing it? Kind of like under the
Just
arm
under,
and running?
A lot of test tubes in luggage.
In
luggage.
Yeah,
Test tubes in luggage.
Yeah.
I bet he's a mule. So which one of you guys is the mule?
Yeah.
In fact, I did that at the Jack Daniel's distillery one time. I was there with one of my early partners, Chris Mueller, who I brought on as partner in the first couple years, and then ended up buying him out after that. But we were at this Jack Daniel's distillery, and it was really one of the best tours I've ever had. Even a lot of breweries. It's just, I'm sure a lot of listeners have maybe perhaps been on this distillery tour. But they bring you by the fermenters, and they're just big open vats of yellow corn fermenting. And I kind of I just kind of touched it, because he said, the guy giving the tour, put your finger in there.
Oh, yeah.
And so I kind of, okay, sure, this is a fermentation, but all right, I'll stick my finger in there. And then he's looking at me, he says, come on, put it in there farther, put your arm in there. Okay. So I pulled my arm out. I've got a lot of Jack Daniel's yeast on me and stuff. So I thought, well, maybe I'll try to keep this or whatever. So I had this is a few years
to have
ago.
a petri dish in your
No,
arm?
what I had was a film canister. When you still had film, and so it was an empty film canister. So I just opened the top and I kind of shook my hand into this film canister, and I brought it back to San Diego, and sure enough, there was some viable yeast in there.
Was there?
I played with that for a while, but we ended up getting that yeast differently later because it's still questionable. But it was all mixed with okay.
like Chris White,
right?
Whatever you had.
So I had to fish that stuff out.
Yeah.
Hey, it's all about plating.
I like your level of preparedness, though. That's a great story. All right, business plan wise, then let me ask you this. So, people planning a brewery, they have to set aside money for equipment and set aside money for their materials and things to get started. Did you have to, you realized you were going to have to go and purchase these strains of yeast from European yeast banks. Is this an expensive thing to do? Did you have to set aside a good chunk of money to buy yeast strains then?
Not yeast strains so much. I mean, when I first decided I would do White Labs, my parents gave me a loan for $15,000. And I thought, wow, that's a lot of money. This is going to get me far. Well,
it's like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Half hour later, you're calling them again. Hey,
right. So I had to go knocking.
15?
Yeah.
Did you ever pay them back? Or
yeah.
Or are they eating Alpo?
But then they loaned me more.
Okay.
So, but I had to go to banks fairly quickly after that, and SBA loans and things like that I did pay back, and you get more. That's a constant cycle.
Yeah.
You pay off loans, you get more loans, and you keep doing that. But
constant as in constant, or is in constant for a while?
Oh, probably every year when we get new loans and buy new equipment, and
you can forget we're saving on that microscope.
Don't think you ever get out of debt. I mean, come on.
Okay. All right.
Well, he doesn't have much debt right now.
No, but that's
once you go in, just go in with both feet.
Yeah. I'm trying not to. I've gone like...
He's cringing right now.
Yeah, it's kind of like
but go on. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Well, in terms of the laboratory equipment and everything else, the cost of the strains itself aren't that much.
Can you give me an example of just a random strain?
Oh, yeah. Let's see. One of the last lager strains I think we bought was about $300 or $400.
Oh, okay.
So, over a lot of strains, it starts making a difference, but still...
But it's not so proprietary that they're saying you have to buy, for the rights to this strain, it's $10,000. It's nothing like that. Okay.
Right.
All right.
yeast used to be, I think, a little bit more expensive before, White Lab started, or before YE started even, because they had started before me. And so yeast traditionally was something that if you bought from a yeast bank in Munich or something, that's what you paid.
Yeah.
If you paid $300 or $400, you got a thimble full.
Okay.
Where now commercial breweries can buy yeast from us for $300 or $400 and pitch, 10 or 15 hectoliters of beer.
And will you offer a specific proprietary yeast to a microbrewer from anywhere that you don't give to anybody else?
What we generally do is brewers come to us with strains of yeast.
Okay.
It may be yeast strains they've stole themselves.
Sure.
But we don't ask those questions.
It's a very plagiaristic business.
We've heard of the black market. Is this the white market?
Yeah, that's right.
Maybe the kind of the Swiss bank thing,
Don't ask, don't tell.
You don't ask.
Swiss bank, I love it.
Yeah, and if they tell us, I don't want them to tell me, because then if they does go somewhere else, then they might think that we did something else with a strain. It's very important if somebody's banking a strain with you that there's a lot of trust there. Yeah. I'm sure we have some contracts and things, but it does come down to trust.
Okay.
That they have to trust us that we're not going to relabel it and do something else with it. And so there's always that kind of speculation out there, and everybody's a conspiracy theorist.
Well, wasn't the question about you giving specific rights or exclusive rights to somebody? You have a strain that you like and somebody wants it as a microbrewery. Do you give exclusive rights for that?
Generally, if it's something we've developed ourselves, it can be very expensive. So, $10,000 or $15,000. So, and more. So those are strains we would definitely distribute ourselves.
Yeah.
But if a brewer comes to us with a strain, for a few $100s, we will analyze that strain and then bank it for them for year after year. And if they, of course, stop paying for it, then it kind of comes into our on our property. But which happens, brewers and breweries fail. But we will continue to charge that brewer, and then the yeast they buy also costs more, because we have to work it up from a different source than something we might have, starting every 2 days. We'd have to specifically schedule in a certain yeast strain, and so there's some scheduling issues.
Yeah.
Which is a big deal for us, because we grow 50 to 100 different strains a week. So because we're starting yeast every 2 days, and a run can be 100 different strains. But it's not always different strains. So, but there's that. What that means is a lot of scheduling.
Yeah,
a lot of different yeast strains to schedule.
Right.
Are you running 2-3 shifts, or?
We have right now. It's about 2.5.
Okay.
Yes.
Who's the half? Is that like the special
Mike comes in.
Yeah,
he comes in about 3 in the morning and kind of lights the burner.
Mike, I'm the half.
We've gone to 24. We've gone to 3 shifts. Typically, when we go to 3 shifts is August, September, October, because the wine season starts, and we grow a lot of wine yeast. Basically just for Napa and Sonoma.
Okay.
Not much on the homemade side. I mean, we do, but it doesn't make a big impact on our business. But the Napa Sonoma crush time has a big influence, and so that's when we'll have to add the third shift.
Some shifts.
So don't call it crush time for no reason.
Right.
All right. People want to know how different, when you get your strain, say from Munich, that you got for $300 or whatever you did. How different is that strain when we get it? Or is there any are you trying your best just to reproduce that exact strain and give it to us?
That is a good question, and
it depends.
It depends. We always, even if it comes from a yeast bank, we plate it out. We look for contamination first, and then we look for variety within the population. And you'll be surprised sometimes, even good yeast banks, the samples we get have either maybe some bacteria sometimes because sometimes bacteria is very hard to get rid of. It can associate with cell surfaces, and it's so much smaller than yeast. So we screen it for bacteria and wild yeast first. Then we screen it for the differences in the population genetically and through fermentations. And then what we try to freeze and then grow for our strains would be the idea is what it was supposed to be from the yeast bank.
So it is, you are really trying to fix the problems and give us the original strain, whatever it is you have to do to give us that.
And a lot of times there is no we receive a good sample that's clean and has no genetic drift among the population. It was a few. Typically in the brewing industry, if you're going to make a slant or a plate, you'd use 5 to 10 colonies,
right,
from a plate not just one, because if there is a little bit of differences, or a change, you can account for it with collecting.
Because the majority would actually not have that change,
right? So when we look if we look at a strain and we see some variety, we should at least see 70% being one way.
Yeah,
and take that.
Okay. That's your rule? 70% is the rule?
No, it's just something we see a lot.
Okay.
That's the world, isn't it?
Yeah. 70% of us are stupid. That's the rule, Doc. That's my rule. You notice that when you're driving down the road? That 70% of the people around you are stupid?
Oh, I could.
At least?
I saw a couple of those people in front of me on the way over.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, people want to know, do you guys do dry yeast? And if not, are you going to do dry yeast? I know that when you came out, what you wanted to do, and this is going to be part of our pitching discussion, you wanted to have a product that was pitchable. The idea was to have a ready-to-go and pitchable yeast. So now that, and that was a lot because dry yeast just wasn't up to par back then. The quality wasn't as good. Well, now the quality of dry yeast is coming around again, as I understand it. So what do you think about that?
I think that's correct. So when I started, it was expensive to buy the small amount of yeast that was lab grown, or you could buy dry yeast that wasn't very good. It was a lot of baker's yeast companies that tried to make some brewer's yeast and didn't really realize, I think, how important the sanitation part was for brewer's yeast. Because for baker's yeast, it doesn't really matter. You add it in, it's very little contact time, so the bacteria that are there don't add anything to the flavor anyway.
Okay.
And so these are very short rises that you're doing. So these are numbers. These are contamination numbers that what brewers need. The baker's yeast people have never seen before. They don't, and took them a long time to get kind of over that and to really see what brewers' needs were. So the only way you can get that kind of purity is growing it in a lab environment, keeping it in a lab environment, and not exposing it to all the air demands and the machinery demands you need for drying the yeast.
Okay.
That is starting to change a little bit, and if it does more, our business is making yeast. If we can make yeast in dry form in just as good a shape, that would survive shipping and the storage issue better, we're going to do it. So we've started experimenting a little bit ourselves, but it's just very experimental stage, and it's definitely possible.
Okay. People want to know if you will be adding new yeast strains available to homebrewers. Got anything in the works there?
That's a tough question because we do have a lot of strains we are developing, and then we sell to commercial breweries. But to get it into homebrewers is a different ballgame because the stores, I think Chris would agree, would mostly tell us, please have no more strains.
It's difficult when you have the quantity of strains, and a lot of people, I forget which one you discontinued recently. I think it was like Australian or something like that, where we'll buy it in, and then it just goes bad on the shelves because no one ever buys it.
Okay.
I love the Platinum. The Platinum's a great idea. It's easy because it's 2-3 months worth of it. And when you still see it on the shelf 6 months later, it's time to take it and throw it away.
Gotcha.
Right.
So what time of month do I show up at B3 to get the stock that you guys are about to throw away?
Haven't you seen the big bin outside?
Is there a bin of junk vials out there?
Yeah. Oh, we're collecting over 5,000 to get Chris to come brew with us. Because I knew he would never do it if I asked him to.
That's right.
Right.
No I started that idea about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Threatened you with it then too.
Regan's got like 2 trash cans full of White Labs vials right now, and most of them empty. Most of them our customers come back and throw it into the pile.
Yeah, I made the announcement at the beer club, so everybody they bring them in and
they're waiting.
There's a few clubs I've heard of from on the East Coast too that have talked about being close, so this could be kind of fun. No one's got to 5,000 vials yet.
We even counted.
Customer club. You did.
No, we haven't.
Oh, you haven't.
Yeah,
okay.
I think that's what we got to start
Who
doing.
is going to count? That's the question.
I think just weigh it.
Regan's got plenty of time. You can't weigh it because
JP.
some have liquid, some don't, some have half liquid.
Yeah.
Boy, Sharon in our office would sure like to count all those vials. I think we'll have Joanne
send them to her.
Well, let's look at it this way, Chris. We just say we have 5,000, and he's got to pay somebody else to count and make sure.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
Mike.
There's Mike. Damn it, Mike.
They bill us for the time because we came up with 4,872.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting to think of new ways to make strains available to homebrewers. I mean, the Platinum program, it tends to be 2 years, though, because when you make some marketing materials and then it's hard to just keep it to 1 year.
I don't know what the Platinum program is.
Oh,
go for it.
Well, it's 2 different strains for a 2-month period. Okay. So that allows us to get through some different yeasts that are in the bank, and we can say, okay, from January and February, it's the Essex yeast and something else.
Okay.
And so we can try some different strains. And so we do that, but then of course what happens is the following January, people want that strain again.
Yeah.
Especially the Mexican lager.
Right.
I think that's time to bring that one full swing.
I love that strain.
Yeah. Is that like a Vienna lager yeast then?
Well, you can make a Vienna lager
but that's
out of it.
not the Mexican lager one.
Well, it is, because the Vienna lagers are made with the strain, but also light beers for Corona,
like
those
your
kind
Corona,
of beers,
okay.
right?
All right.
It's just a very clean strain. So if you want to make these Mexican lagers that don't have that European sulfur and other nice flavor compounds, actually,
then
you can do that with Mexican lager. But you can make a lot of people do different things. It's kind of strange when you say Mexican lager, and I see it in the brew pubs. Some people have taken that as, okay, and they're going to make a Corona style beer, and it works.
Yeah.
And some people have said, I want to make the Vienna style beer, and it works as well.
Okay.
But of course, then when you're making Vienna, you have a little bit more flexibility anyway of using some other strains.
Okay.
Mexican lager works, but so does German lager and things, depending on your interpretation of the Vienna.
So one thing Chris has been talking about, I don't know, you've been talking about 4 or 5 years now, and I've been experimenting a little bit, and I know other people, and now I know you guys are releasing strains this way too, is blended strains.
Yeah.
And playing with throwing 2 vials in, one of another, or a 3-to-1 or something of that nature.
I have a listener question about that, wanting to know if you sporulate or cross any of the yeast strains in your collection in an effort to construct new strains.
We don't do any mating. Brewer's yeast is notoriously difficult to mate. It doesn't want to. It doesn't have to survive. It's been in this rich brew medium, and in fact, brewers have helped this by reusing it.
You should buy a dinner first.
Yeah, maybe a movie, right, Doc? I mean, you got to sweet talk it, don't you?
Exactly.
Can't just jump right in there. Sometimes you can, but then you don't want that. You don't want to stay with that yeast for a long time.
No, that's a one-night
That's
yeast.
commitment.
Hey!
Trust me, I fought that commitment thing for a long time.
Yeah. Sorry.
I don't have anything funny to add. Sorry.
Neither do I. That's all right.
But where were we?
That's what I'm sorry about.
That's what you do.
Doc and I do
about
that.
getting cross strains and
yeah. No, so we don't. I mean, you can force it to mate, and it's possible.
It's illegal
but
in 12 states.
It's very difficult. Yeah, he's just very young, but we just blend it. Yeah, so that's kind of our answer. So we do a lot of blending, and that's a lot of fun. We have a little B3 homebrew system that we do trial beers on, and
then you sell those
and
that you've blended. You'll put them in a vial and
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's an example of a blended one?
We have what we call an American ale yeast blend, which is a blend of a few strains. We don't say specifically what it is, but there's California ale yeast in there. There's the cleaner, neutral strains, but it also has some Kolsch yeast in there.
Okay.
So that makes kind of a nice, clean. A lot of people making ales in the U.S., they're not these typically fruity and maybe some sulfur and stuff ales of the British Isles.
Yeah.
They're clean and neutral, almost more lager-like ales. And so this blend was to kind of capture that and use a little bit of California, a little bit of Kolsch, and a couple of other strains.
Nice.
So 3 or 4 strains in each blend.
Okay.
Well, let's say somebody wants to start mixing their own. What would they look for? They say they want to mix 2 strains and making an ale. What would be two things you want to look for to mix 2 different strains?
Well, you want to. It's a good question, and it's creativity and artistic.
License.
Yes, it is a little bit. I mean, I was just talking to a brewer recently who liked our wit yeast, the WP 400, but he thought it was a little too sulfury and a little too big in his wit beer. So what he did was he actually combined it with the Saison yeast. And so he made his own blend. He bought, we custom blend for commercial breweries too because you can do it on bigger orders. So we blended the Saison yeast with the wit yeast, and the resulting beer that he makes out of this is really a nice, cleaner maybe wit beer. Just doesn't have as much sulfur impact as the 400, which, again, some people like, but he was looking for something a little different. So I think that was a pretty creative blend. So starting with kind of what you want, and then he tried, it's not 1-to-1 either, but, most brewer strains don't kill off each other. They don't outcompete them in too aggressive a way. So you can blend most of the ale and lager strains together because you don't see a lot of differences in the growth rate among the 30, 40, 50 strains that we have.
What about, say, early pitching and late pitching one yeast over the other? Would you see an advantage in that?
Right. So if you blend the yeast in the beginning, you're going to get flavor impact from all of the strains.
Right.
And so that's what most people do. Some people want to, say, just finish out a high gravity beer, so they'll add a champagne yeast or the super high gravity, something like that, at the near the end of fermentation. So you're not going to get flavor impact from that yeast because it's not going to go through the same kind of growth cycle. But you're going to get a functional thing of finishing out a high gravity beer.
Just dry it out.
Right. So if you want flavor impact from these yeast strains, you want them in the beginning, and so that's what our blends are focused on.
So mix them both in the beginning to get the flavor, but if you want to do physical things, split the induction of them.
Right.
Is champagne pretty competitive yeast, meaning it'll want to knock the other one out?
No, you can even add it in the beginning, and it won't really do much to the other strains. No.
Oh, really?
It'll kind of wait, and but some of these strains like champagne and even our super high gravity yeast don't really like the complex sugars in brewer's wort, maltotriose, for example. So you sometimes, even with these high gravity yeast strains, still need some either simple sugars as a percentage for high gravity beers or enzyme use.
So how about if you want to dry out, say, a large Belgian beer, and you're talking about them not liking the complex sugars? Letting your Abbey yeast run through it pretty far and then dosing it again with the sugar solution halfway through fermentation and then putting a high gravity yeast on top of that.
I think that's a good way. To do. I think, especially with the Belgian beers, adding a little complexity like that, finishing out with a different strain. Our Saison yeast is that way. For example, it tends to slow down fermentation and not finish out very fast. So, what's done by some people, including brewers in Belgium, is finish it out with, say, what else they've got in the brewery, or California ale yeast, or something like that, or a different Belgian strain. Or some people blend it in the beginning to do that. But
well, we've heard a lot of talk about the Saison yeast, and most people having to pump up the temperature. I mean, way up there. We're talking 90 just to get it to finish out.
Oh, I can do that.
Yeah, I'll bet. Just gonna rub your car, boy.
Yeah.
Finish, baby, finish.
High fermentation.
But a lot of I'm really for the Saison yeast just to get it to finish out. And I've always talked to you for the past 2 years about repitching it with a double yeast on top of it to dry, and it's worked for me.
Right, and that's one way, and as you said, some people let it free rise kind of halfway through fermentation, and that seems to work for most commercial breweries too. They let it free rise into the 80s.
Right.
Is what
really high.
Right. Well, but it all depends on fermentation geometry, fermenter geometry and things too. Can you let, one brewery that lets his beers ferment in Belgian beers at 85 and another one that another brewery that would do it at 85, the beers would taste completely different. So one brewery may get away with 85, one brewery might have to do 68 or 70.
Yeah. All right, we got to take our last break here. Everyone needs a break.
I'm really excited.
Oh.
She wants that microscope.
About the break?
About our listener from India being in a chat room currently with us.
Wow, that's great.
And asking
Indian
the fermentation
is
question.
there.
Isn't that awesome?
Which fermentation question was it?
He fermented his beer at 90 degrees Fahrenheit and it was fermented out in 2 days. Is there anything wrong with his beer?
Isn't that room temperature over there?
It's like
fusel alcohol.
Was my question
That's
too.
what he said. He said when he got to the last bottle of the beer, it started tasting really good.
He had them all at once?
All 3 days?
Yeah.
But he's totally stoked. He just told me that he had brewed 3 batches this week already. Isn't that awesome?
Yeah,
he's in India. I think that's great.
He has to get his close by homebrew market's 2,000 miles away.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure, we've got I get emails from different places. I think I got one from India recently that somebody had bought supplies from beer, from more beer.
It's him because he claims to be the only home brewer in India.
Yeah, it must be him.
Yeah, maybe it was the same person.
Yeah.
Or maybe there's hundreds.
No, he says he's the only one.
It's so.
And I believe
exciting.
him. I don't know why. I just do. I believe him because he's a nice guy.
He might be one of our only customers because a lot of times I'll refuse to ship to certain areas that it is difficult to track in.
Yeah.
Like, nobody's willing to pay for UPS shipments there, you know, on a homebrew scale, so you have to ship U.S. mail.
Right.
And unless they've done it before, a lot of them, after a while, we have to refuse because they'll just say they never got it, or they really will never get it. But, you know, who's that always fall back to? Who has to pay for the shipment and all that good jazz?
Well, of course.
Afghanistan's
So
out for you.
if he's in, he's in. Like, he's a lucky guy to be able to get stuff.
Yeah, that's good. No, he says that, and normally he gets it. It takes a long time. I remember one time he wrote into us and said that for the first time his shipment got caught up in customs and he had to fight with customs for a week, I think, to get it out of him. But, he keeps at it. You know, that's dedication.
I just love the fact that it's 7:45 a.m. in India currently, and he's listening to a beer show.
Is he drinking a beer with us? Yeah.
I don't know.
Is it like Thursday there? Or?
Yeah. It's 7:45 a.m. in November in India right now. All right. Indian Beer Geek, I'm glad you're with us today. That's awesome that you're listening live. And you folks have heard his emails. He writes into us frequently, and we always like that. That's a lot of fun. Okay. I got a lot of questions. I'm not going to get to everybody's question today. I'm just going to say it right now. I'm going to try my best. We'll do the rapid fire thing.
We will.
Get your Stump the Whites questions ready because I got a couple of things to give away. So our version today of Stump the Brewer is going to be Stump the Whites.
But you have to PM them to me. Only private messages are accepted.
Okay. Private
and the answer too.
To Danielle, you got to be in the chat room. You have to have the correct answer.
She's getting stern over there.
Yeah, she's all business.
And we're giving away 2 very nice German style steins from Gordon Beers.
Yeah, they're great. They've got
one.
They've got the lid on top. Chris has just stolen one, so we're down to 1. It better be good questions.
They're fluted too.
And I think we've got a T-shirt from the movie Beer Fest to give away
we do.
too, which comes out Friday.
Signed T-shirt.
Oh, it's signed.
It's signed and it says Germany rocks.
All right.
So how'd the interview go with the?
It went great. I had a lot of fun. They were very cool. The couple of guys from the Broken Lizard Comedy Group, they made Super Troopers and all of that. They have this new movie coming out called Beer Fest. Comes out Friday. Hung out with them. Did an interview a couple of weeks ago. Played it on the Free FM show. You have to listen to that archive. But they were cool and they were fun. And as part of the interview, I had to drink beer. Their PR person actually told me you have to come down to the Gordon Beer Show and drink beer with
Twisted
them.
your little arm.
I said, all right.
Poor Justin.
I have to.
How you don't drink beer before 8 in the morning? So.
Yeah.
But I will.
So it was cool, and they gave us a couple of things to give away, and one of them was a T-shirt. So we got a T-shirt to give away. We got a couple steins from Gordon Biersch to give away. So get your Stump the Whites question ready, and we'll do that when we come back. Like I said, I can't get to all your questions, but what everybody wants to know, and it's real important on this show, is pitching temperatures and fermentation temperatures. So don't worry. When we come back, we're going to get into all of that business, and we're going to find out which of the whites has a bigger brain. Right here on the Brewing Network. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Brewcasters on the Brewing Network.
I'm on. Thank God, not a moment too soon. There's no one in the room, right?
No.
All right. That's a really hard line.
You wrote it.
What's with the Abacast stream? God damn it. Oh, these are really hard. I'm just going to have to do this a bunch of times. Who wrote this shit? You know what? Go ahead and start me over. And just trash that whole take. Hit that fucking whirlpool, vigorously. Holy shit, I need some air. Damn, my yeast will not proof in my Oh my god, I'm so white.
Okay.
Proof and fucking boobs being rude and my kid pulled out to say that a whole lot faster. This whole chat room I want now, Justin. Shit, that's a lot of words. 50G, why don't you push eject me? I'm screaming Gucci when D pushes me off the screen. Ow. I'm screaming Gucci when D pushes me off the screen. That's the end of that. Then we're off into the pseudo chorus. I just got booted out of the chat room. I was so in the groove on the last one. That was crap. Holy shit, I just got booted out of the fucking chat room.
Did you have to laugh?
Sweet shit that likes life anaerobic. Damn, play still not proof and I'm out of air. Doc's little voice in my ear screaming. I realize that I'm missing 2 whole bars of lyrics. Damn, play still not proof and fucking boobs being rude, my kid. That one's impossible. Think I can't think, but then I hear Doc's little voice in my ear. This is where it just falls apart. I don't know how this worked in my head. Motherfucker, drink!
Drink! Oh man, that always kind of irked me. You're this guy like, drink!
That part's easy. It's how do I fit all that other crap in there? Alright, that's probably good enough for now. Oh, that's funny. Is that you? Oh, that's me.
Shit.
I'm throwing down an angry rap song. Oh, what time is it? Probably within the next 20 minutes. I love you, sweetie. Okay, running out of time.
Just got booted out of the chat room. That's the gay version. Okay, don't even think about putting that on there. This is just pathetic, isn't it? Look at the 2 jerk-offs. Too bad I don't have like a good ripping fart right now or something. Wait, I'm actually touching cloth. Doc's little voice in my head screaming, are you going at the Burning Man? Hail JP. It really sounds like I'm on the pot, doesn't it?
What?
I think it does. Oh, let's just fan take a crap. I'm out.
Someone told me something someday that someone else had told them, so to speak. I've been holding on too long. If this one ever said to that one, never listen to this one again. I've been holding on too long. Shaking underneath me, nothing's gonna make it settle down. I've been holding on too long. Poseidon took Nerus's daughter, now the gods are fighting overseas. I've been holding on too long. Hello, I don't think we've met. You're telling me to let go. I don't know where to begin. You could start by trying something like changing opposites. You say let go. I don't know where to begin. Always when you least expect it, skate the edges, your eyes start to blink. I've been holding on too long. What's inside the tortured tin man? Ask him if he really wants his heart. I've been holding on too long. Hello, I don't think we've met. You're telling me to let go. I don't know where to begin. You could start by trying something like changing opposites. You say let go. I don't know where to begin. 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 I don't know where to begin.
You're listening to Three Guys.
Excuse me? What about me?
Sorry. You're listening to Three Guys and One Girl use a radio show as an excuse to drink more beer. The Brewcasters on the Brewing Network.
It never fails. The fourth break of the show is a mad rush for the food and the beer and the bathroom.
Yeah.
And we always have a hard time getting back to the studio.
You know what I'm attempting tonight?
Yeah, we did almost forget. We're like, hey, oh, shit, we were doing a show.
I'm attempting to become drunk of the week.
Are you?
Yes.
I'd love to see that one.
The last time that happened, people loved it. They've been asking for it ever since.
Dr. Scott and I are going to have a drink off.
Whoa.
Woo!
You ready for that, Doc?
No.
I don't know if you can handle the German Vixen.
Vixen?
Yeah, that's what they call you in there, isn't it?
No.
The Bavarian Vixen or
No.
something? Yeah, they do.
No.
I've seen it.
No.
Oh, they just must have been PMing me then.
They call you the Vixen?
No, they're PMing me about her.
About the Vixen.
They don't want
Sean
her to
O'Sullivan is a vixen.
Yeah, Sean O'Sullivan hanging out in the studio with us. He's doing just the hanging and drinking with us.
Sean, what's the temperature here in Pacheco?
Cool in the studio. It's nice, isn't it? Thank you to Henry once again, Doc. I think we both, from the bottom of our hearts, want to thank Henry. He not only sent the first air conditioner, when that wasn't good enough, he sent his second air conditioner, and I rigged him up this week, and it's actually been...
I looked at it. I'm so proud of you.
It looks good, huh, Doc?
He teed the line in.
Yeah.
He stacked them up, kept the footprint small.
Yeah.
He even insulated the ducting. Man,
Really?
it's cool.
I did everything you said. You said it's got to be insulated. We're losing a lot there.
Right.
Chris Graham had a couple suggestions, and I went to work on it because you were gone last week, and I said I got to get it ready. And this is the most comfortable environment that we've ever broadcast in, right?
Yep. Oh, exactly.
Since since forever.
There's no sweaty brows in here, and all summer long, oh my God, it's been bad in here.
Well, Mike's a little sweaty, but that's just because
he's just excited.
That's just Mike. He's happy to be here, right?
Yeah.
Now, Mike, you live up here in our area, right?
Yes.
You do. So you have a little more access to the wine part of the business.
Yes, I do.
You do.
We've done quite a bit of work up in Napa, Sonoma, and that's increasing quite a bit. And of course, right now is when things are going to start really picking up with the wine.
Okay, is that sort of part of the white business plan? Is to keep increasing the wine part of it too, and not just the beer?
Well, certainly wineries are
lucrative.
They're paying more attention to the yeast, and that's been a trend over the last few years, particularly when they're trying to use traditional techniques, traditional yeast techniques, and we're helping them do that. Use their native strains.
Okay.
Things along those lines.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And is that a competitive field for you guys in this area? Are there a lot of other companies that can do the local thing like you do?
There are not too many people that are specializing in what we do with wine yeast.
Okay.
Yeah, we're pretty much the only ones that are specializing in this particular area. Where
that's good.
Traditionally, wineries will do their natural fermentations, or not so much nowadays, but that's how wine used to be made, and we're helping them do that, but with cultured yeast.
Okay. Now, do you guys have to do the cold calls like I do when I'm going and looking for sponsors, or do people know the white name? Do they know, like, okay, if we're talking yeast, we're talking about the whites?
With beer, they know.
Okay.
With wine, they're learning.
Okay, I got you. So you are still kind of saying, hey, we've been doing this for a while, and we really can help you, kind of
Absolutely.
thing.
Yeah.
That part sucks. I'm going to tell you right now, Doc.
So they don't like say, hey, this is Mike White calling?
Yeah. And they go, oh, Mike, we've been waiting on you.
Can we talk to Chris?
No, I just say Chris. I just say, hi, I'm Chris White.
It's Chris.
No, I don't do that. I don't do that.
Did you guys
ask to talk to Chris?
Did you guys used to do the old switcheroo back in the day? You know, you got
only by accident.
Really?
Yeah, friends would come up to us, girlfriends, and mistake.
Yeah.
Because from the back, we always have looked quite a bit the same.
Yeah.
And of course, when you get yes, so,
if I'm coming up from you from behind,
I'm talking
I
about.
think I want to know which one.
I'm talking about more casual confrontations, tappings and hellos and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Oh, hello.
And if you were at beer functions, it's quite common for me to be called Chris.
Okay.
because a lot of people know Chris, and we look somewhat alike.
Sure.
I just do it on purpose.
Hey, Chris. F you, Doc.
No, actually, I asked Mike, I go, hey, Chris, can we get a picture together?
Yeah.
He looks at me.
There was one problem with Chris's upbringing, and not upbringing, but his young life, when he pretended he was me, and so that's coming back to haunt him.
Yeah.
Because occasionally, I don't really do it, I'm just joking, but he's afraid, I think, that I will start to pretend I'm Chris.
That would be funny. Did you ever have... I got to do this at least a couple times a show. Get totally sidetracked. It's the way we work around here.
So that's the yeast pitching temp.
Yeah, we're gonna get to the temps in just a second.
It comes around full circle.
Did you now sort of in light of the switcheroo? Did you ever have, like, say, one of you had a hot girlfriend or something, and the other one always wanted to kind of like see what it was all about, and she came up to you? And unbeknownst to her, so let's say Chris had the hot girlfriend, and she came up to you, Mike, and was like, "Oh, hi, babe," like thought you were Chris, and just planted one on you, and you didn't bother to stop her because you thought she was hot anyway.
Yeah, it happened all the time.
It did it?
No, I'm just joking.
That's dirty.
No, I can frankly say I never remember kissing any of his girlfriends.
Okay.
Yes, so.
Either one of them?
Chris is looking at him very funny.
Chris has got a disagreeing look on his face. Was there someone?
Oh yeah, I think so. A few times those things happen.
Chris is the honest one. Mike's going to beat his ass after the show.
Yes.
All right, let's get back on topic. I just thought it'd be funny to find that.
Girls are curious.
Of course they are. Yeah. Oh, so you're saying that it wasn't even a sneaky thing.
It wasn't an accident.
It was more like,
no.
Are they really the same?
Right.
No, that's just dirty.
Can we play the Stump the Brewer now?
No, we got to get into fermentation first. Do you already have all your Stump the Brewer?
I have like 9.
I'm doing quick. Let's do one. Let's do
one. Asked by a female listener.
Which one?
Mrs. Henning.
Okay.
All right.
I figured that one, but I had to ask.
What's the 3 major vitamins in brewer's yeast?
Okay. This is for all the marbles, guys.
Vitamin B would be the big one.
Okay. Which is actually very good for you and not an easy to find vitamin in natural things. So drinking beer is a great source of vitamin B.
Other minerals? I don't know other vitamins. I mean, I guess to say what other vitamins.
Isn't
in the brewer's yeast?
Actually in the yeast?
Well, the question is the 3 major vitamins, so I guess you have to name the biggest ones. Ooh, are we
You don't know anything other than B?
Well,
the B1, B12,
how about
B6?
D?
There you go.
How about D? Nope.
I like Mike. Mike's like me. I was going to do the same thing Mike just did.
E?
Yeah, hey, I bet you there's some A in there. All right, what's the answer?
The answer is vitamin B1, vitamin B2, and niacin.
That's B12, isn't it? Yeah.
Is niacin, does that make sense?
That's B1, B2,
So Chris
B12.
said the Bs, so that's all of the Bs.
Yeah, I don't know.
Not stumped.
Not stumped. He just didn't go through
That's a trick question, and nope, not stumped.
Okay, not
stumped.
Okay, so save the other ones. We're going to move on because we really do need to talk about fermentation temperatures. All right, we're going to start with the big question, and I've had this conversation with you, Chris, so not that you were long-winded, but I can be long-winded, and so can you. It's happened. Let's try to keep it short. Cold.
Let me get another beer.
Now, it says on your vial. It says right on your vial. And John Plisse, when he comes in and talks about warm pitching, it's he refers to your vial that say for your ale yeast, you should pitch warmer and then drop the beer down to your desired fermentation temperature. It's on both of them, I think.
Yeah,
actually.
but he pushes the lager.
Well, that's right. John's all about the lagers. I think it says 70 degrees and then bring it down.
He wants to pitch at 70, but bring it down to fermentation temperature after pitching, where everybody else on the cold pitching side wants it to bring down to fermentation temperature, then pitch.
What's the deal, Chris?
Okay, long-winded.
What would you do?
It brings up a few things, really.
It depends.
It depends. But fermentation, and it does depend, actually. I guess I think I will expand on that a little bit, but fermentation is a numbers game. When you add hops, you add so many pounds per barrel, and same with grain. Yeast is a little bit trickier because it's
So small. So you're in the billions and millions when you're talking about yeast. But it's still a numbers game. So, and yeast have to multiply. So if you, and there's a common kind of number put around a lot of 1 million cells per mil per degree Plato.
Yeah.
But there is no one pitching rate. It depends. It really does. It's different for lagers and ales and Belgian beers and Hefeweizens. And so it's not always 1 million per mil per degree Plato. But whatever you pitch, if it's 1 million, if it's 500,000 per mil per degree Plato, you need it to multiply.
Okay.
So it's not going to multiply at cold temperatures.
All right.
Even lager yeast. I mean, they will a little bit. Lager yeast typically, if you pitch them cold, they won't grow 4 or 5-fold. They'll grow 2 to 3-fold.
Okay.
So if you're going to get less yeast growth, you've got to have that much more yeast when you start with.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you notice in our packaging, there's not a different lager container than an ale container.
Right.
It's all one standard size. And so on the label, we have the same temperature to start the fermentations at. And in fact, we don't put, for say Oktoberfest lager yeast, we don't say this, a good fermentation temperature for that strain, because we don't want to confuse people and have them start low with no extra manipulation and then have a problem. So we say the same thing, start at 75, lower to your desired fermentation temperature, whether it's an ale or lager.
Okay.
And it's not just a trick to use because of the packaging. It actually works for a couple of reasons. For example, if you're making a lager, if you pitch it 70, 75, and then after fermentation gets started, you lower the temperature of the fermentation. The reason it doesn't create this fruit character, a lot of esters and fusel alcohols,
which is the argument,
right?
That warm pitching produces these off flavors and fusel alcohols.
The only reason you're fermenting a lager cold is so it tastes as this clean character, and that's why lagers are so popular. That it's not so much yeast character; it's more malt and hops character, because the yeast flavors are subtle because you're fermenting cold.
All right,
and it doesn't grow very much. But those esters and fusel alcohols take other substrates that aren't made yet. The alcohols, for example, aren't made yet in the first 10 hours.
Okay.
And so you can do this, you can pitch a little warmer, and then the mistake though is then you pitch, okay, it's warm, and then you put it into cooling. Well, then you've got, it's cooling too fast. You really need, if you're going to pitch warmer, you need to let the yeast start to multiply and then show signs of fermentation and then let it cool down, because now you're adding cooling when the yeast is in their log phase growth and they're fermenting very aggressively. They're creating their own heat, so they're kind of immune to this temperature change, so you're not going to arrest them.
Okay.
So one way to do it is you pitch lager yeast at, say, 70. You let it go 10 or 12 hours, you're seeing fermentation, then you cool it down about a degree an hour to 55 degrees.
Okay.
And I'd say about 90% of even the commercial breweries that buy yeast from us do it this way, because they don't have to buy 3 times the amount of yeast.
Right.
They can, and some do, and pitch cold, but most buy the ale rates and then pitch at that warmer temperature and cool it down, and they just can't tell any difference.
Yeah.
So I would encourage people to try it. Yeah, they just don't. I mean, if there was a difference, commercial breweries wouldn't do it.
Now, I'm going to remind you of a conversation that you and I had. And it goes along with the same thing, but I'm just going to cut through the fat and get right to the specifics. And by the way, I got to be really careful about this, because I hang out with brewers and people in the industry, and we have lots of conversations, and I always have to, like, for example, the key words to speaking to me are off the record. If anything, if anybody says those words, I am morally obligated to stand by off the record. And there are other times where people don't say off the record, and I have to make the judgment call about off the record. That's neither here nor there, because this wasn't necessarily a private conversation. But you said to me specifically that it is chemically impossible for the off flavors that people are talking about to be produced within those first few hours of warm pitching. That what you recommend is to, I think you had said about a degree an hour. That if you lower you start off at 70 and you lower about a degree an hour, that knowing yeast and all that it does, that it's actually chemically impossible for that yeast in that early stage to produce the off flavors that people are talking about. Did I misunderstand?
Well, Justin, it depends.
Good answer on that one.
Am I mistaken?
No. I mean, the chemistry, it depends on how much yeast you start with, though. It does come back to the numbers. If you're repitching, for example, and you've got a truckload of yeast, then it's going to start producing these flavors very fast.
Okay.
So because it's consuming the sugar so quickly. But
what about in your vial, which has a standard amount in every vial?
Right.
What
And
about that?
kind of designed for that pale ale kind of pitching rate and what it was really designed for. Then you're just not going to produce those esters and those fusel alcohols, and it's not going to taste fruity. It's going to taste like a lager. And it's going to be clean.
Okay.
The first few hours, it's going to have to run through its reproduction phase.
Right.
And if it's doing that, it's not producing those flavors that you're thinking about. And what he just said, if you're starting with a big hairy pitch that doesn't have to reproduce, because they know how many neighbors they have in there and how much sugar is going to be in there, and heck, they're going to start just chewing through it right away. So you're going to get those flavors a lot faster. So it is a numbers game. So if you pitch low, they're going to need to boost up their numbers.
So pitching low, you're not going to have any off effects or off flavors if you do a vial amount pitch. So your standard pitch. If you drop a degree an hour like you recommend and you pitch warm, you're going to be fine.
Yes.
That's what you're saying.
Yep.
And that degree an hour is not the easiest thing in the world to calculate. Keep that in mind as the home brewer.
Yeah.
You want to probably set like 3-hour goals. You know, set the refrigerator, come back, check on it, set it again, check on it. Because if you set it at 50 degrees and come back, you might be at 50 degrees in a couple hours and halt fermentation altogether.
And watch your ambient, too, because if your garage is at 100 degrees and you're trying to pull it down, it's not going to go as fast. You try to do the same thing in the middle of winter and your garage is 50 degrees.
Yeah.
You're going to pull it down a lot faster.
Okay.
So, kind of like Chris said, do it in 3-hour increments. Just knock it down 3 degrees, see what happens in 3 hours.
Homebrewers get a lot of stuck fermentations because of temperature issues, where commercial breweries don't have that happen to them really because they've got very good temperature control. A lot of liquid with a small temperature band around the fermenter, where in homebrewing you've got a small amount of liquid fermenting and say a big cooler. And you're trying to do it very quickly. So, being careful with those temperatures is important to yeast because, again, they're single cells.
Yeah.
You change the temperature much on them, they think survival mode. You know, if it gets warmer or cooler, they need to think about shutting down.
Right.
And what you see is your fermentation shutting down because now they're producing cell wall material for survival rather than what they're trying to do.
And when you're doing the cooling, cool the actual liquid, like on your temp controller. Don't cool the air. The air is going to change ultra quick, and you might find a 20-degree differential in the heat of fermentation.
Yeah. So where is the temp controller going then?
The probe ideally would be into the beer through a thermal well. If you can't do that, then at least tape it to the carboy bucket, whatever you have.
Okay.
Yeah, like Chris said a long time ago, was yeast don't like to get cold fast. They don't know when it's going to stop. They don't know you're only going down 3 degrees and stopping. As far as they know, they're going into the deep freeze. They're going to make a nice protein coat on their cell wall, and they're going to freeze up and say, "I'm not doing it anymore." Okay. And you're going to get that stuck fermentation. So you got to trick them.
By the way, when did this become the wine show?
Yes.
This actually is the first time ever in the history of our show that some of us in the studio have switched over to wine from beer.
Yeah, and Chris Graham, he picked on me before for that.
Are you having wine also?
Yes. Who else?
Oh, and
I have both.
Justin has both, too.
I have both, too. I'm two-fisting it. Well, Whitey out there was opening up a nice bottle of wine, and it looked good. I've been drinking beer for my
3 days,
days on end, and I don't know. I thought it'd be a nice change, and it's a fantastic wine.
It is
It is actually a tasty wine,
and it's something that's being brewed too, right?
Does that make us gay
fermented
in here just because we're enjoying a little wine?
Yes.
I'm all right.
And we're talking about.
Do you need one more thing?
I know that's what I'm saying. Like
they all need yeast.
That's right. Everything needs
nice
yeast.
job, Mike.
Good.
Good. Hey, that's marketing,
I'll
baby.
tell you what Mike says, it's good.
Chris, it was probably the smartest thing you've ever done in your life is bringing your brother on.
Yeah. Okay.
Quality of life issue, too.
I got to keep
Made your
things
mom
moving
happy.
because we are getting late in the show. So, all right, I guess we'll leave the warm, cold thing alone. Now, we want to talk starters and no starters. And, a lot of people talk about this. And I was surprised, again, by the conversations I had with you about starters or no starters. So the idea behind White Lab's pitchable vials, well, is that they're pitchable vials. And in essence, that your idea was to put enough yeast cells in there that you didn't need to do a starter. And on top of that, you've talked to us before, even on the show, about there's a way to actually, that the vial itself works as a starter. And that's why, and B3 recommends this with all of their documentation when they give you a kit with the White Labs yeast. You bring it, you should pull it out of the fridge the night before, 24 hours. And what you've said, Chris, is to just keep opening the cap. And you're releasing the pressure, and I don't know if you're then letting oxygen in also, but you, in essence, you've said that the vial works as a starter itself. So do we need to be doing a starter, or is it fine? What's the difference?
I think this kind of ranks in the same thing with the hot and cold, and maybe that's why it's good for the end of the show, because there's controversial topics that it's not always a right answer, but
if I have to hear it depends.
but it does. But Mike, does it depend?
So, Chris, what gravity, we'll make this a little simpler, what gravity would you say this is pitchable up to in your...
Well, it is not just gravity too. It's, but I mean, I think what we say on the vial is 1075. I think.
Oh, that's pretty big. Yeah.
Right. So, but anything over 1065 too is something to start thinking about because those are fairly big beers. But you can make a starter. And again, the yeast, it's never, people ask me about it a lot. It's never a bad thing to make a starter. At the very least, the yeast is waking up. Now the reason I say the vial itself can be a starter is that's just from basically warming up the yeast. But as the yeast warms up, it's thinking, okay, metabolism.
Comes to
so life. Just allowing it to warm up over 6 to 8 hours and releasing the pressure, yeast will start to bud, and there's not a lot of sugar there, but at least the metabolic energy will begin, and you're going to see a difference in the fermentation. So letting yeast warm up itself is kind of a little bit of the same idea that you're doing as a starter, because in a starter, generally you're not creating a lot of new cells. For example, a vial of our yeast into, say, a pint or even 2 pints, there's not enough. The yeast is designed to go into 5 gallons. There's just not enough sugar there per cell to see much yeast growth.
Okay.
So what you're getting is you're getting yeast metabolism started, yeast activity started, and you can get some of that just by letting the yeast warm up. Of course, then if you don't release the cap, it's going to just foam out when you open it up. So it isn't. One little tip is to crack that cap as soon as you take it out of the refrigerator, and then shake it up a little bit, and continue to crack that cap once in a while, just to let that gas come out as it's warming up.
So that's all you're doing is releasing.
I usually just put it in my pocket, crack it, and I pull it out of the refrigerator and just put it in my pocket.
Right.
And it warms up in my pockets, and I'm making my starter.
So Doc does the sweaty nuts method.
Sweaty nut method. It works. I don't actually put it in the underwear part.
Are you a left pocket guy or right pocket?
Yeah, left. I had to think about that.
It depends on which way it's hanging, I guess.
But Chris, I've talked to you about starters before, and he cringes when he thinks about people handling yeast.
Yeah.
Right.
And he says, it depends. If you're going to be a sloppy guy making starters, don't make a starter.
Right. That's exactly why I caution a little bit, because I've seen a lot of problems develop over just making a starter, because now you're taking the yeast out of the container and trying to do something with it. You have wort that may not be sterile. You're trying to grow it. Where is it growing? And even if you were making good starters, try to do a side-by-side, a starter and a non-starter, and most of the people who do that come back and tell me, I was making starters all these times. The beer doesn't taste any different with a starter.
Yeah.
And you've done your own tests at White Labs that way too, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And what did you notice?
You just can't taste any flavor differences. Even a lot of times when you see a fermentation difference, which can be a few hours, it can be, but then some people do, or feel they do. So you kind of got to do it for yourself. And same way with the cold pitching versus warm pitching. Do it for yourself and see if there's no flavor difference. If there is a flavor difference, or if you can perceive one, then do it a different way.
Yeah. Okay.
You really almost have to do a split batch to really define that.
To tell the difference.
When you do, like Chris Graham was talking about, changing. I did this one week, and then I did the same beer next week, and it was different. Well, you're going to get a different beer if you did it the same way. Yeah. You almost have to do a split batch, try them both different ways to really tell if you're, overworking your beer.
And have it side by side.
See, because we're talking about a kind of a small difference. If we were talking about pitching a tenth of what's in our vial, for example, and that's going to be a difference, because then it's going to take a few days for fermentation to start, and you're going to have stress flavors. You're going to have you can have contamination issues. But the difference between fermentation starting in 5 to 8 hours or 8 to 12 hours and the final beer flavor difference is almost impossible to perceive.
Right.
And in fact, if the fermentation starts too soon, there's problems. The brewer feels, oh great, fermentation started in 2 hours. And I've heard this a lot, people that want to almost high-five me and saying, oh, my fermentation started in 2 hours.
Yeah.
Didn't I do it all right? Well, actually, no, because you didn't allow for yeast to grow it all.
Okay.
And so if you don't have the yeast growth, you don't have some of the other byproducts from that growth that you need for that flavor profile. For example, if you're trying to make a Hefeweizen and you get fermentation started in 2 hours, I bet you're not going to have much banana and kind of character or the fruitiness you might want in your Hefeweizen.
Okay.
It's going to be too clean.
Good point.
Well, that's what the Hefeweizen that I did. I've always talked to you about stressing the hef yeast.
Mm-hmm.
So I pitched 1 vial in 10 gallons without a starter.
Okay.
I woke it up. I threw some more. I fed it that morning and then pitched it in. We can taste some later. I brought some in.
Oh, good.
Ooh.
So we'll try that. But
So
it was totally this one. It was well. I wanted to make a starter and I didn't.
Yeah.
And I wanted to push the stress thing on this yeast.
You felt dirty, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. Oh, so dirty. So it was 1 vial in a 10-gallon conical.
Yeah.
And it started up pretty fast. I mean, it was 12 hours or so, 10 hours, and it was bubbling along pretty good. It wasn't the 2-hour ferment like you're talking about, which would just strip everything out of that you're trying to get.
All right, let me back us up a second, because there's a couple different ways to do starters. Now you're talking about doing a starter isn't necessarily giving you any yeast propagation. You're more waking up yeast. But that's when you just you create and help me. Feel free to help me out here, Doc. You create the food, the wort once, and you put the yeast in, and you do a starter for a couple of days, and you pitch it like that. And so in that sense, there's no propagation going on. You're just maybe waking it up. But there's the other way to do a starter that Doc and Jamil like to do, where they'll create the wort, they pitch the yeast, and it goes a couple of days, and then it starts to settle down. And they pour off that wort and add fresh wort on top of it again. So you're talking now about a 5-day starter or something like that. Is that then yeast propagation? Are you then actually, because
I try to increase it tenfold every time.
So is that a way to actually, because you're saying, most starters aren't propagation, but Jamil and Doc like to think that they are doing propagation.
Right, and so if you are growing it up tenfold each time, meaning if you have 100 mils, you put it into 1,000 mils,
right.
And prop it up, that is propagation. That is what Christian Hansen kind of developed in the late 1800s at Carlsberg Laboratories in terms of manipulating brewer's yeast and propagating brewer's yeast for lager beer also.
Okay.
And so that tenfold number has stuck with brewers.
Okay.
And that is how you propagate yeast up. But if you take one of our vials, for example, and you put it into 1 liter, its volume anyway before it was concentrated is somewhere around 700 milliliters.
Okay.
Of just of a slurry, just of a culture. So now but what you get in a tube is about 35 to 50 mils. So if you put that basically culture that was in 700 mils into 1,000 mils, you can see that you just haven't increased the volume
right,
much.
Waking it up.
Exactly.
I try to get it into 2,000 at least the first round, and then it goes into a carboy on a stir plate after that. I get anal.
So then you are. So is he then propagating yeast?
Yes, he probably
Okay.
is. I mean, he's getting new cells to be generated. He's propagating yeast, and that what I tell people, if you like working with yeast, if you like making starters, then you should.
Yeah.
But if you don't feel you have to.
Right.
But there are certain beer styles you may.
Yeah. See, I would really love, cause Doc, you're a consistent brewer and you know your system and it's dialed in. I would actually really like to taste a split batch from you side by side of one where you really do the propagation and the whole bit, and the other one where you just pitch a vial. And I really want to taste them side by side. Okay. And on top of that, I want to get a panel in here to blind taste them. Too.
All right. Oh, so now you're going to make me make how many conicals for Scott? Because he's going to want this to be like...
I really, because a blind tasting is really the only way to know if we can taste the differences. And I'm really interested in this.
I'll do that. I'll make just a simple pail.
Yeah.
And I'll split it into the 2 conicals.
Okay. Let's do that.
Chris White, what are you doing with most of the beer you guys are brewing right now? Because I know you're doing a ton of experiments on the 20-gallon system, 4 conicals, all temp controlled.
Where does that go?
Yeah, where does most of this bear go?
Sounds like Mike White.
Your house?
Goes to Mike White. Yeah. Mike?
Neva drinks it in the lab. Yes, they do drink some of it there.
You got to keep your employees happy,
right?
And beer's one way.
No, but I mean, are you guys quantifying anything yet? Out of curiosity.
Yes.
Lag times and whatnot.
Well, that's the goals. What we'd like to look at a lot of these things these questions we ask and do some of these experiments ourselves, but the honest answer really is we're too busy.
Sure. No, I understand that completely.
Right. Well, just meaning that, we have this good vision of using this system to test some other kind of homebrew, maybe myths or
Mythbusters. Huh?
Right. But right now, what we're using mostly for is to develop to look at new strains and different growth things we do with the strains.
Our next show is going to be the Yeast Busters. When we do all these blind tests, it's going to be Yeast Busters.
Yeah, I was just going to add that our lab manager, Neva Parker, does most of these tests, and she analyzes the beer and she gets a good idea of the performance on beer to beer. So we are doing quite a bit of analysis with it.
You are.
Cool.
And this is why I like to ask you guys about it, because I know that a great answer is to say we should try it and we should do it side by side. But the fact is, you guys have tried it, and not only have you tried it, you've looked at the results under a microscope, and that's what I'm interested. I really want to know, what differences you've noticed in a starter versus no starter, or in the cold pitch versus warm pitch.
Right. What we haven't done is look at it chemically a little bit, which would be nice. Okay. We have a gas chromatograph which separates beer into just all sorts of different flavor compounds.
Who doesn't have one of those sitting around?
Doc's nipples just got over.
Did.
Microscope's nothing. A what?
Gas chromatograph.
Yeah.
We can use it we use it now for testing beer samples that brewers send us, but we can also try if we can get some time on that equipment, we can use it to look at some of these fermentation issues and see if we see differences chemically too.
Yeah.
So you can see how much and what comes through, how many fusels, how many different kind of compounds come through in it.
Yeah.
I want
to come down and play with that.
Yes. I have a really stupid question, but I hear it all the time. A typical thing we hear every day is, hey, I got my 002 strain and it's dead. And I'm like, well, how do you know it's dead? And I'm looking at it and I'm like, wait a second, read my web description. We call it the cottage cheese strain. Right. Why does that strain do that over every other strain?
What is it that is...
It gets clumpy.
The 002 looks like cottage cheese when you shake it up.
Okay.
Clumps up.
All right.
Right. It's such a flocculent strain, meaning it comes together at the end of fermentation and drops out, and it gets very clumpy because it's creating big balls of yeast. And
do you have trouble with it not fermenting all the way through and dropping out too fast?
So it drops out fairly quickly, and sometimes you need to rouse that back into fermentation. So as a home brewer, kind of shaking up your fermenter to get that yeast back in solution will help
complete the fermentations. But even in the vial, you can see it being that clumpy. I mean, if you try to turn the vial up and down, the whole block, a brick of yeast will move back and forth.
Right.
And as you try to shake it, you see these big clumps. Where California ale yeast, if you shake it, it'll be more powdery and it'll go into solution a lot better because it's not forming these big clumps. So some people see that with English ale yeast or the British ale yeast, and they might perceive it as a problem.
A big dead turd.
Right.
Yeah.
It looks a little strange, but that is one of the things. We've always wanted to put the yeast in a package that, home brewers could see, and so sometimes that's could be too much information because it's good, and that's what it's supposed to be doing. But if you don't know that, it can look like it's
I've noticed
curdled or something.
I've used a lot of your vials, a lot of the different ones, and they all look different.
Right.
They're just their little characteristics of what they look like in the vial. When
we've wanted to do that, yeah, because that's one of the things about having a lot of different yeast strains. They're all very different, and you can see that difference immediately. I mean, even people in the lab who don't know brewing or just don't know about beer can tell you what's different about the wit yeast from the Hefeweizen yeast and the California ale yeast by looks and smells.
Wow.
So, Chris, when you get that next call that says that, you just say, "Do you have a microscope?"
Yeah.
And they say no. You say, "Well, call me back when you do."
I have gas.
Excellent.
I'm glad you're over there.
Is that an inappropriate response to that discussion?
Just like Howard Stern, they have him in his own little booth.
Yeah,
for a reason.
That's Robin.
I need my own booth because I am lighting some fires over here, Daniela.
Thank you for announcing that one.
Yeah, I didn't mean to ruin the flow there, but I just couldn't help but
it just came to a screeching halt.
Well, I was trying to concentrate, but I was rumbling at the same time, and didn't feel very good.
Yeah, I saw your face contort a little bit.
You can always tell.
Yeah. Okay.
Does yeast propagate during aerobic or the anaerobic phase? Mike White.
I could answer this, but I think what we all need to do is turn to the experts.
Okay. Chris White.
Oh.
You had a 50-50 chance there, dude. I would expect that you were a gambler and you were going to go for it.
I'm pretty disappointed by that performance.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you be? I know. He does actually know the answer.
Okay.
But,
so let him answer. We haven't answered this yet.
Really, beer fermentation happens anaerobically. So there's really almost no aerobic phase. Yeast absorb some oxygen, but they're not growing traditionally what we think of aerobic.
Okay.
So there's just too much sugar there. And so they're always kind of anaerobic in their growth cycle anyway. And when you see growth, if you have a clear carboy and the whole thing's, moving around and creating gas, it's anaerobic. And they're growing. That's why they grow 4 or 5-fold, because it is anaerobic. If you just supply them with plenty of oxygen, they grow 10-fold, 100-fold, 50-fold. But brewer fermentations, maybe 50-fold most, but brewer fermentations go about 5-fold because we keep them anaerobic.
Okay.
But that's when they're growing.
How about when you're pumping them with oxygen?
Right. Good. Yeah. Right. The yeast suck up the oxygen so fast. Anyway, about 30 minutes after you've added the oxygen, it's been all absorbed by yeast.
So you're saying, okay, it'd be a good idea to just give them more oxygen every 30 minutes, every hour, if you're up that late.
Well, you can, but
can you over oxygenate them?
Yes. You can spurn too much yeast growth through the oxygen, and then you start getting over the 5-fold growth, and you start, for example, our yeast cultures, even though they're grown on brewer's wort, don't taste very interesting. They're fairly oxidized. There's other flavor compounds because there's so much growth, and there's very little alcohol. It's under 1% alcohol,
so
because
you
we're
want
driving it to yeast growth.
You want the anaerobic.
Yes.
So you said that the aerobic hardly even happens. The second part of this question was, is any alcohol produced during the aerobic? But I guess,
no. Well, very little, if any.
Okay. Now, so back to the oxygenation. I do like 3 minutes. I crank up my O2 for 3 minutes in a 5-gallon carboy. Is that fine? Is that too much?
It depends.
Yeah. It depends on the gravity?
It depends on the gravity, the beer style, the fermentation, the temperature.
Temperature is key.
And how fast you're pumping it in.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
Hey.
Okay, so pitching let's go 68, 70 degrees. I've got 5 gallons of a regular pale ale. I mean, there's got to be a standard
60
scale.
seconds. Are you using a stone?
60 seconds?
Yep.
Okay, so now you just were asking. Yes, I am using a stone.
Okay.
Doc was just asking if we can overdo it. Now you say, Chris Graham, 60 seconds. What if I do go for 3 minutes? Am I overdoing it?
Well, you're not really going to overdo it because at one time like that, because the wort's only going to hold so much oxygen. It's the saturation point of wort. So if you saturate it with, say, 10 parts per million, 10 ppm of oxygen,
won't take any
and then you stop, fine. Whatever else you add was going to come out of solution.
Love diminishing returns.
So I can't overdo it?
Not in 3 minutes.
If you keep it going, say you 3 minutes, you got up to 10 ppm, yeast ate all that, now we're down to very minimal oxygen in solution.
Yeah.
And now you keep doing that, you keep bringing it back up to 10 ppm, and you keep taking more oxygen.
Okay.
That's where you're giving it too much.
Okay. But in the initial oxygenation, I could walk away and have a pee and come back, and it's fine.
Yes.
Okay.
The yeast are only going to take up so much, plus you're going to off-gas.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's not going to stay in solution.
Okay.
I've had beers.
So
I've had home brews though that have had people. First off, most of us had our oxygen before yeast.
Yeah.
I mean, how detrimental is pure oxygen to yeast, Chris?
Well, I mean, pure oxygen can be deadly to yeast, but actually adding the oxygen first can be a good thing because, there's various studies out there, but if you add the yeast and you don't give it the oxygen right away, there can be some negative effects on yeast. Right?
Yeah, that's why I like to add oxygen first, then add the yeast, because I've known people to start the oxygen going, pour their yeast in it, and then come back 3-4 minutes later and had weird problems. And I'm convinced that it had to do with weird effects of the oxygen directly on the yeast.
Oh, really?
One of the stresses of yeast is called oxidative stress, and that is from oxygen reacting basically with the yeast cells. So it is a good practice by a lot of breweries that they'll oxygenate separately before the yeast for that very reason.
You want to build a nice neighborhood first, then move them in. Don't move them in and then promise them a nice neighborhood because they're going to get pissed.
Don't move to Concord then.
Exactly.
That is really
it's coming up. It's an upcoming community.
And then oxygenate. So I'm glad that you've said that.
I do it the other way.
Okay. And maybe now we all will.
Yeah.
Oz, you're on the air. What's happening, brother?
Hey.
G'day, guys. How you going?
G'day.
Just
G'day, mate.
What's the word from down under?
Mate, it's still hot. It's still sunny.
Oh.
All right.
Say wallaby.
Yeah, Wallaby.
Love that.
Thank you. What's the word, man? What's happening?
I was just walked in, so I don't know if these questions have already been answered. But the main one, I did a brew the other day, pitched it was probably a litre of yeast slurry into 50 litres of wort, but the gravity on the beer was quite low, and it fermented in about 24 hours.
Okay.
Is there going to be big problems there? Is the beer going to come out okay?
I think you're going to drink it anyway.
What kind of beer is it?
I am. It was actually an American Pale Ale that come out at, I think it was 10 degrees Plato, a little bit under.
Yeah, what do you think, Chris? We were talking earlier about something like a hef where you want the yeast to be a little stressed. If it goes too fast, that's bad news.
Yeah, a little too fast. I mean, it's going to be drinkable. It's going to be okay.
I think because you started low is why it finished so fast.
But that's still a couple of that's a few days fast. So you're going to probably have some fusel alcohols, some higher alcohols in there, some esters. And so it may not be as clean as you like. It may even give you a little headache.
He knows headaches.
I know headaches. I might make this one into beer schnapps or something like that if that's the case.
Right.
You could probably make a good beer schnapps because you can separate that stuff out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I have a headache, I might as well make a good one.
That's true.
Right. I'd rather have the fruitiness, the fusels than say the dimethyl sulfide or something like that, which comes from taking too long to ferment. And to me, those beers are kind of undrinkable. So a beer with higher fusels and esters, no big deal.
He'll go the headache.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
The other thing I've been thinking of too is when I'm culturing up yeast or making the starters. You were just talking about over oxygenating. I actually use air through a HEPA filter. If I have that running continuously on a very slow flow rate, is that still going to over-oxygenate, or is the little O2 that's actually in the air itself not going to cause that problem?
How long are you letting it go?
I haven't done it yet. It's something I'm thinking might actually get better growth. Normally, I'm with the air, I'll run it for about 10 minutes and then turn it off and do it again in a couple more hours.
Well, you're getting about 20% if it's air instead of 100% if it's oxygen. And then it depends on the saturation temperature, or saturation rate with the temperature of the whole thing. You kind of want to make sure you stop it before it starts fermenting. So, I don't know. Do it side by side and let it run.
Right. That's a new answer. It depends.
Yeah.
Do it side by side.
For heaven's sake.
But I think if you let it run at, just that way air for a couple hours wouldn't hurt. And you get some good propagation.
Most of our law of diminishing returns happens at about an hour on pure oxygen or pure air.
Just pure air and just letting it run. Because I go in and I'll do pure oxygen before I pitch, and I'll go in a few hours later, do it again, and then it's usually before I go to bed. If I wake up in the morning and it's not fermenting again,
it means you forgot to pitch the yeast.
Well, no, usually because I see
because that's happened to
Chris
Scott.
is right. I'm going to say that first it means what Chris said, and second it means whatever Doc wants to say.
I don't remember pitching the last yeast because Justin came over and we got really hammered.
Yeah.
But I woke up in the morning and I had 2 Erlenmeyers that were dirty. So and there was nothing in them.
Yeah.
So I must have pitched.
That must have to do with you and Justin.
Yeah.
Actually, you came over earlier and we got hammered first.
That was the same day?
Yeah. That was the funny thing, is that I called Doc by 2, and he's like, yeah, well, that's cool. Come on over. It'll be session 2 because I already got drunk with Chris,
and I'm trying to brew.
And now I'm having a break, and then you come over and we'll do it again.
Yeah. and pretty much, okay, I got this. I got to get this cleaned up. I got to pitch. Damn, I did pitch. I guess I pitched. It looked like I pitched.
All right. I just want to point out, Oz, and I want to point this out for you so that you feel bad about not being here with us, as you should be.
Okay.
There's an entire party going on in the background of the show today.
Man.
We have a live studio audience. There's there was 15 or 20 people here earlier. I can't even count.
Pushing
that.
wine on everybody.
Running around, serving beers. It's the most well-served show we've ever had. And Oz, you're missing the whole thing.
It works for me.
Man, there's a heap of German girls there, isn't there?
Yeah.
There's a couple Germans.
Some French ones.
There's some French.
Asian women.
Yeah.
It's all good.
Shame on
Doc,
you.
you need to invent that molecular transport system so you can hit the button so it can just appear there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's true. We'll ask that Starship Trooper caller if he can do that for us.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, Ozzy, thanks, brother.
No worries.
We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Cheers out.
All right, so we got to wrap some things up here, and
We gotta play Stump the Brewer.
I know we'll do that. We're going to stump the whites, and I do have your questions in front of me. I want to say that now that Chris White is a friend of mine, and that I know Mike lives close to here, I'm going to force them to come in and do shows more often with us. So even though I've got all these questions in front of us, we'll get them answered at some point in the future. Even if you guys can just come and do a co-host thing with us, it doesn't have to be.
Will you guys come back? It depends.
Yes. Oh.
Doc, I didn't give him the choice.
I want him to say, well, it depends.
It depends.
Mike, are you coming back?
I'm having Mike back without Chris, I think.
Depends.
Today's show has been brought to you by Depends.
That's right.
I wanted, before I decide, I'd like to do a side-by-side comparison.
That's a good idea. Last week's show was the Pragmatic Show. This week's show is the It Depends Show, and we're happy to bring them both to you. All right, let's do Stump the Whites and get out of here. Daniela, what do you got?
All right, question number 1. Are you ready?
Dun, dun, dun.
What health problems are improved by taking brewer's yeast? And this question is from Smoky Bacon.
Smoky Bacon.
It's not herpes.
Okay. So does he
you know that for
by
sure.
ingesting brewer's yeast?
By taking it as a medication.
Oh, as a medication even?
Yeah.
Oh.
It was some study in Europe that has proved that.
Gastrointestinal.
Make a guess.
Right, I mean a particular...
Mike's got an answer.
Mike, what?
Well, people think yeast can solve all kinds of problems. The other day, somebody asked us that he heard that yeast could solve the problems he had with the sewer system.
Mm-hmm.
So that doesn't quite apply to this question, but I'm just saying people think people think yeast can solve the world's problems.
Yeah.
And health-wise, Chris?
I tend to agree with them.
Little diarrhea problem?
Yes. Diarrhea.
Diarrhea. All right.
Not stumped. Well.
Caller, you're on the Brewing Network. What can we do for you? That's you, caller.
Hey, what's going on?
What's happening? Who are we talking to?
Hey, Justin, it's Hot Rod.
It's sorry?
It's Hot Rod.
Hot Rod. What's happening, my brother? What can we do for you?
Not too much. I want to call in for Drunk of the Week.
Oh, all right.
I was saying, there's no stump question here. You sound kind of hammered.
Yeah. What have you been drinking?
Let's see. Cream Ale, Einbecker, Bach, you name it. IPA.
Everything.
All right. Anything that was in the fridge? Are you running low now? Are you running out?
Oh, hell no. I got 8 kegs on tap.
But I gotta say, we've received a lot of very good questions of Hot Rod tonight. He has asked some of the very good questions.
He can still type?
Yeah, so he's a very...
he can't be that drunk then.
A very functional drunk of the week.
Oh, wait.
I'm quick on the keys.
Functional drunk.
All right. Well, good for you. All right. Hey, let's give him a Stein.
All right.
Yeah, you want a Gordon Beer Stein to get drunk on the next time you call us?
Hey, that works for me.
All right. Now, they're actually totally cool. We contemplated keeping them all for ourselves. And
we'll need a report, though.
They're really nice.
We then had
How do they work?
All right, I'll give you the report.
All right. You need to tell Daniela your address or something. Send her an email, Daniela@thebrewingnetwork.com. Or just, if you're still in the chat room, type it there, because you may not remember tomorrow, dude.
I would PM it, because you don't want to get blasted from all the other people.
I'll remember.
You're kind of a lethargic drunk of the week. Like, you're almost like the high guy of the week.
I bet he's hugging that cold tile in the bathroom already. He's just got that cell phone.
Hey, wait, no. I laid tile today.
Are you just kind of a mellow drinker? Is that what's happening?
I don't know.
Not one of... It depends. Depends on what I'm drinking.
You work all weekend. You listen into the chat room, and you just do what you got to do.
And where are you calling from?
Calling from Connecticut.
Yeah, where in Connecticut?
State.
Which one? Which city?
I'm down in Milford.
Right.
Were you about to ask what Connecticut?
Yeah.
Which Connecticut?
Which Connecticut? Would that be the gay Connecticut or the no? Oh, hey, good. In Milford, Connecticut. Hey, glad that you're calling from my hometown.
That would be Meriden, Connecticut.
Yeah, Meriden is the gay Connecticut.
So which side of the tile feels better on your face? The right side of the toilet or the left side of the toilet?
Sit right next to the
You know what you need? You're going to need that side-by-side test.
That's right. Leave him alone, Doc. He's all right. He's just a little lethargic. All right. Gordon Beer Stein coming your way. Send Daniela an email or just private message her right now. And thanks for calling, brother.
All right. Thanks, guys. Keep up the great work.
All right. We'll see you. Okay. What else we got for Stump the Whites? Anything? Because we got another Stein to give away.
Of course we do.
Yeah.
All right. How many vials of White Labs yeast do I currently have in my fridge?
Oh, that ain't cool.
That doesn't count.
That's no good.
Unless they guess it right.
Yeah, you can just guess.
Mike White.
He has got 5 vials.
I was going to guess 5.
No, he actually does have. You want to make a guess too, Chris?
Go ahead. We'll let Chris guess. 8? Chris has 8?
He has 12.
Wow.
He's a fan of your company.
Yeah.
He's got the Baker's Yeast dozen.
Yeah, so that's a lot of brewing coming up.
6 are expired, but it's all good.
All right, not stumped, though.
Not stumped. So that's
but
stumped.
That's not fair unless you invite him over.
All right. Another question for the T-shirt now, right?
Oh, we've got another Stein and a T-shirt to give away.
All right.
Stein.
What does the ring around the Budweiser AB in the label represent?
That's insinuating that they drank a lot of Budweiser. That's
the one. Mike has one in front of him. Maybe he could answer. No.
Slander.
Now that was just mean. Of all the things we've done today, that was just plain mean.
Yeah, he's lying. It's actually in my pocket.
And by the way, it's the tall boy. All right. What's the ring mean?
Wow.
What it mean? Is it for marketing? You mean reasons or
no? It has a real meaning.
Graham, do you know this?
What's sad about this is Chris knows the whole AB yeast story.
Yeah.
And if this was anything related to that, we would be here for another hour.
Not only do I think the question's a little unfair, I'm sort of offended by the question.
Actually, I think it should be dismissed.
Because you do know that AB has refused to do our show, don't you?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, we have.
There they are calling now, though.
I'm all lined up. I'm going to go ahead and dismiss the question.
All right.
Yeah, because what do you
You're the
think
man.
What do you think this is? Caller, you're on the BN. What's happening?
Oh, I'm just calling in to let you know that Hot Rod wasn't anywhere near drunk enough.
Is that right? You're calling to say that you're doing better?
Oh, yeah. This is Bug Eater.
Hey, Bug Eater, how are you?
Oh, real good.
And,
I was judging a Belgian competition this morning, so 11 o'clock this morning I was judging a flight of 10 or 12 Belgian wheat beers, and we've been drinking the leftovers ever since here.
Okay. Well, you might be the drunker of the week of drunks. Let's give him what do you want? You want the Stein or you want the T-shirt?
I could sure use the Stein.
The Stein's really nice. That's a good choice.
I love that.
Very nice.
All right, the Stein goes to Boog Eater, not just because he's the second drunk of the week and that he's done a good job of it, but because he's a nice guy. What the hell, right?
Of course I'm a nice guy.
All right, Boog Eater, you got a Stein coming to you. Send Danielle an email.
Sure will.
Hey, Bug.
Yeah.
Did you drink all my beer?
Did I drink all your beer? I loved your beer.
It's good stuff, huh? Which ones did you send him?
I sent him like 6, I think.
Really?
Yeah, you sent 6 of them.
And did any of them suck?
No, they were all good.
Okay.
The one I liked best was that Winter Warmer, I think it was.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. What was that? A chocolate mint in that?
Yeah, that was my, my Christmas
was great.
Ale. Yeah, I wanted it to taste like basically a chocolate mint.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it worked.
Oh, it worked really good.
Oh, good.
That's nice. That was the Santa exchange, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. You can go to our forum to find out more about that because there'll be another one done at Christmas time. And if you're a user who's not registered for our forum, it's a good reason to do so because we send each other beer and it's fun. And you might get lucky enough to get Doc's or Jamil's or even Boog Eaters because Boog Eaters sent us some great beer too. Yeah. So there you go. All right, Boog Eater, send Danielle an email and we'll get you that Stein.
Okay.
Thanks, brother.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I got Doc Pagala, this guy. He's been calling the whole show like 10 times. I had to answer his call finally. Doc, I gotta say, you're like half a stalker. Like, I mean, it's not as if I missed all your earlier calls.
He's drinking and dialing, man. Come on.
That's what I'm doing. I'm drinking and dialing, guy.
You doing the drunk dial?
Oh, yeah.
I guess I could qualify as another drunk of the week.
Say everybody's my friend. They want to talk to me.
Man, oh man. Are you calling just for drunk of the week?
Oh, no. I actually had a question for you, but I forgot what the hell it was.
I like how Doc sounds a lot more Irish now at the end of the show than he did at the beginning.
Yeah.
You guys notice that? He turned into a leprechaun in like 2 hours.
Well, that's what happens when you get me drinking here. You know.
I think I got a White Labs hat up on my shelf I'm looking at right now. Will that be all right for you?
I'll keep the damn hat. I don't need that.
No, I'll give you hey, persistence pays, right?
Okay, I'll take that.
Unless you're not going to wear it, then I'm not going to send it.
No, I'll wear it just to piss my bosses off.
And by the look at your shiny head in your picture here, you need a hat.
You need a hat, man. Anybody with a shiny head needs a hat.
Right, Doc? You got a shiny head.
Hey, I don't go outside in the winter because it's cold. I don't go outside in the summer because it's sunny.
You need a hat,
man.
All right. Whoa.
Whoa. That was cool.
Just going to leave him on the line because it sounds cool. It's like we're talking to Chewbacca.
No, it's like your 2-year-old little keyboard
it's
thing.
Stephen Hawking.
Yeah. It is. I didn't know that Doc was he's also Stephen Hawking.
He's Doc Hawking.
No, just an Irish Filipino guy. I kind of wonder how many Irish Filipinos are out there.
Sorry, that's just funny. All right, I got to cut you off, Doc, because your connection has
deteriorated.
The clarity is no good anymore. Send Danielle an email. I'll give you a White Labs hat that we stole fair and square from Neva.
I still have another stump to Chris.
In other words, you're breaking up. I can't hear you.
Okay, what do we got? We've got the Beer Fest shirt to give away.
We still have the shirt to give
away. Give us the stump of white.
Chris, what is the scientific name for yeast that causes thrush?
Thrush.
Whatever, Dr. Scott.
Yeah. Do we know?
I answer? Probably, we'll say a yeast that causes a lot of trouble, Candida.
Yep.
That is correct.
Wow.
He does know everything.
I told you guys. That's like 4 questions now. The man's not been stumped. Look at this guy. Didn't I say?
He's fantastic.
Said the white knows it all.
I wish we could give away that shirt. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, we were having trouble giving away that shirt.
All right, next caller gets a shirt. 888-401-BEER.
We could be here till midnight. I'll take it.
Call in quick because we're getting out of here. 888-401-BEER. All you got to do is dial the number and, say 3 words or something, and we'll give you a T-shirt. All right, next week I want you to know, I believe I got Magnolia coming into the Free FM show. Dave McLean, and we're going to be talking about cask condition ales and also the new place that he's opening up here in San Francisco that's really exciting. Sean, you know about this new place he's opening up out here, right? The Dave McLean's opening. It's I think it's called the Alembic. Do I have that right?
It's called the Alembic. It's actually a little bit further down on Haight, next to the Red Vic.
And he's doing it's
kind of like a small, sort of a small batch micro distillery concept with small plates, kind of like in a clubby kind of way.
Right.
Like really low key. There'll be some beer, but it's like really sort of emphasizing sort of the pairing of micro distilled spirits with small plates.
It's really right up Doc's alley, because he's doing really fine and aged spirits as well as this micro distilled, and you're gonna love this place.
The space is amazing, actually. He's really kind of taken sort of the historical kind of approach with San Francisco. He has the bar is made up of these old benches that were out in this old arena out in San Francisco, and it's just going to be an awesome space.
When's this opening up?
I think in about a month or so.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's next month, and we'll find out next week on the Free FM show. So tune in at 3 o'clock on 106.9 Free FM if you're in the area, or 106.9freefm.com if you're not. Caller, you're on the air, and the winner of a Beer Fest T-shirt. Who are we talking to?
Hey, this is Warren.
Warren, what's happening, my brother?
Oh, not much, man. I was calling in with a stumpy wine guy, yeast person.
All right, let's do it. What do you got?
Well, I was going to ask how many sugar transporters are in yeast.
How many sugar
carbon sugar transporters?
Mike?
It depends.
In my last count with my microscope, I counted 33.
In your side-by-side test.
With my side-by-side test, and after I analyzed different options, because it depends each time you look under the microscope. So when I looked, and I had side-by-side microscopes. And,
I could make it a little easier for him.
Okay.
Genetically, how many genes are there encoding hexose transporters?
Are you listening
33.
He's sticking with 33.
He's looking for an even number.
Which, by the way, is also the number on the back of a Rolling Rock bottle. I don't know if there's any correlation there.
This is a team effort. I am now transferring to Chris White.
Chris White.
Go ahead, Mike. That's fine. We'll go with Mike.
Okay, he's going with 33.
Okay. That's a different answer than what I know.
Okay, what do you got?
I was thinking of 18.
18.
Yeah, there's hexose transporters 1 through 17, and then the Gal 2 open reading.
Well, you know what?
Again,
the Gal 2 is what threw me. So
I was looking through 2 microscopes. I was adding them together and came up with something similar to that.
I stacked them on top of each other.
And he had to hold one eye. He's having trouble seeing.
Warren, you get a Beer Fest T-shirt.
Oh, yeah.
Courtesy of the movie Beer Fest.
It's signed by the producers and actors.
It's actually signed. So if you don't care about them, you can wash it several times and the signature will go away.
No, that's really cool.
I think it's totally cool.
Seeing that.
No, they actually, and you know what? They were really cool guys and very down to earth and a lot of fun and nice enough to go ahead and sign
and
some
actually,
stuff.
the shirt comes with a golf ball. I made them sign. The ping pong ball because the guys were playing beer pong.
Beer pong.
Oh, yes, beer pong.
Yeah, and I made them sign a beer pong, and I made them say Germany rocks, and we all love Germans.
Yeah, because all they do in their movies is make fun of the Germans, and Daniela had no problem telling them how offended she was.
Hey, well, I love that, you guys. I mean, grad students can always use more ping pong balls for beer pong, and another free T-shirt is great, too, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And no, thanks for playing. We're making fun of the question, but it's a great question, and right up the alley. We always ask for them to be content-specific, and that's what you did. So send Daniela an email, Daniela at the Brewing Network, and we'll get you that T-shirt.
All right, I'll be sure to do that.
Thanks, brother.
Thank you.
That goes into the... I knew that once, but it's long since forgotten.
Oh.
You just
I'm pretty sure I never knew that.
You just got to give that one to Mike.
I'm not even positive.
Yeah,
that
I
was
have
in English.
to handle all the difficult questions on this show, and I'm sure that will continue.
Well, like Doc said, the best thing Chris ever did was bring you along, Mike, because what would we be doing?
Yeah,
I agree.
And it made Mom happy.
All right, so not only Magnolia on the Free FM show next week, but Colin, Jameel, and Dr. Scott are all going to do an evaluating beer show with us right here on the Brewcast next Sunday. And what they're going to do...
And I knew about that?
No, you don't need to know, Doc.
You'll know on Saturday.
That's right. Doc, you can do this stuff in your sleep, man. You're fine.
Okay.
Basically, what we're doing is teaching you how to take a beer and evaluate the profiles on it and make a decision, because Colin believes that you should have a strategy behind tasting a beer. Now, not just drinking, that's not what we're talking about here, but if you really want to buy a new beer and sit down with it and figure out its flavor profiles, you should kind of look at it from outside the box and have a strategy. So basically, Colin and Jameel are really going to help us evaluate the flavor profiles of beer, and Doc, you're gonna throw it in because you can do this stuff like sleepwalking.
Well, another thing to think about is, you're tasting your beer and think, what is that? I don't like it.
Yeah.
What is that? Here, you guys taste this.
Yeah, let's figure out why.
Hopefully we can teach you guys to discern what that flavor is and why don't I like it in this beer and what's making it that way.
That's right. And that's next week right here on the Brewcast. Caller, you're my last caller. What can I do for you?
He's already standing up. You are the last caller.
What's happening? You there? Did I dump you? Yeah.
Oh, damn.
Well, because he was my super last caller. Didn't even have to really take it. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I got to say thanks to the Whites, of course, from White Labs Yeast Company. You can go to whitelabs.com to check out all their products, and I guess in the next couple of days there's a new website coming out anyway. Mike White is hard at work on that. What are we thinking here? Just a couple of days, maybe early in the week, we're going to see a new website out of you?
We're just trying to make sure a couple of things don't get... screwed up along the process in terms of email and all that. So we're looking at it depends, but certainly Tuesday, Wednesday, you should see a new site. It'll look the same design-wise, but it should have a lot more information on it.
If you put them side by side, they'd look the same, but the new one would have a lot more to it.
But it would
exactly. It depends, but I think it would taste, it'd have a little richer, a little more interesting.
Yeah.
And
fair enough.
More flavorful.
Yeah, a little more flavorful. I think it would take longer to get through the pint.
It's got a good beat. You can dance to it.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
I love it.
God, I love this show.
I did a little beer belly measuring on the Brewers tonight.
Okay, and what do we got?
I got Chris White in awesome shape, 35 only.
Whoa, excellent.
Hey,
you bastard.
Chris, you're a pussy.
I measured Sean O'Sullivan.
Yeah, what are we looking at there?
41.
All right.
There's a difference.
More Chris,
Chris has an unfair advantage. He only drinks a yeast.
It helps with his diarrhea.
What about Mike White? Did you get any Mike White?
No, can I get
I drink a lot more than the yeast, so I don't think you want to...
Oh, we have to. You won't be the tops, I'll tell you.
Thanks to Chris Graham from Beer, and More Beer coming in and hanging out with us. Of course, you can go to morebeer.com or just click any one of those banners on our homepage and it'll take you right there. And Chris is always generous enough to offer his help here, even on a moment's notice.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, stay tuned to the Brewing Network for something. I don't know. I'll put it up there and be surprised as I am. And we'll see you next week, Friday on Lunch Meat, Sunday for Magnolia on the Free FM show, and then right here with Colin Kaminsky from Downtown Joe's, Jameel Zainashev, and, of course, the great Dr. Scott teaching us how to evaluate
Thank you.
beer. We'll see you all later. Thanks, everybody.
Blows my mind. I love homebrew all the time. Yeah, I think I'll have it. Well, I'm the one right now. Good barley wine, chocolate porter, cherry stout. Yeah, you know what I am talking about. But don't you give me that American crude, boys, I want a real homebrew. Homebrew, don't you really love it? That homebrew, can't get enough of it. Homebrew, it blows my mind.